It was supposed to be just another routine flight for Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur, whose name had become synonymous with innovation, technology, and controversy, stepped into the first-class cabin of his private jet. He had just wrapped up an exhausting series of meetings, and as he made his way down the aisle, he felt the familiar sense of relief that comes with being able to unwind. But today, something felt different. There was an inexplicable tension in the air. As he approached his seat, Elon's gaze drifted toward the person sitting across the aisle. And then, his heart skipped a beat. There, in the seat that was supposed to be his, sat none other than Clint Eastwood, the legend, the man who had defined Hollywood for decades, the man whose face had become an icon, whose voice had delivered some of the most unforgettable lines in cinematic history. Elon froze for a moment, unable to believe his eyes. He'd seen Clint on screen 1,000 times, admired his directorial brilliance, and respected his enduring career. But this was real. The person sitting in front of him wasn't just a character in a movie or a name in the credits. He was right here, in the flesh, just a few feet away. The surrealism of the moment hit Elon like a ton of bricks. He had never expected to meet Clint Eastwood, let alone find him in a seat that Elon himself had reserved months ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. After all, what were the odds? Elon's mind raced. Should he just sit down and act as if nothing unusual was happening? Or should he do something? He quickly scanned the rest of the cabin, but it was clear that everyone else was either busy with their own lives or lost in their own world. No one seemed to be paying attention to the man sitting across from him, except for Elon. He hesitated. It wasn't just about the unexpectedness of meeting Clint Eastwood. It was about the fact that he had admired the man for years. Clint had built a legacy in the entertainment world, from his roles in westerns to his directorial triumphs. He was a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that greatness could come from anyone, no matter their beginnings. But here he was, sitting in the same first-class cabin as Elon, as if fate had decided to throw them together at this moment in time. As if on cue, Clint looked up from his reading and caught Elon's gaze. For a brief moment, there was an almost imperceptible pause. It was as though both of them were weighing the situation, deciding how to navigate this strange twist of fate. Elon took a deep breath and, with a sudden burst of spontaneity, made a decision. He wasn't just going to sit there in stunned silence. He was going to do something. "Mr. Eastwood," Elon said, his voice betraying just a hint of nervousness. "I know this might sound strange, but I have a seat in the front row, and I was wondering if you'd mind swapping with me." Clint blinked, clearly surprised by the unexpected offer. "You want me to take your seat?" he asked, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Elon nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Yeah, it's just that, well, you're Clint Eastwood, and I'd be honored if you'd take my seat." Clint studied him for a moment, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You're serious about this, huh?" "Absolutely," Elon replied, a grin spreading across his face. "I mean, who am I to take a seat when someone like you is sitting here?" The two men locked eyes for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. A moment of mutual respect, perhaps, or an understanding that they were both men who had carved their paths in the world, each in their own way. Finally, Clint nodded. "Well, if you insist. I'm not one to turn down an offer like that." With that, the two men stood up, and Elon carefully stepped aside to let Clint take the seat that had been reserved for him. As Clint settled into the plush seat, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He had just given up his first-class seat for Clint Eastwood. It wasn't something that happened every day. As Elon moved to sit in the seat next to him, Clint raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're comfortable back there?" he asked, his voice carrying that signature gravelly tone that had made him a household name. Elon chuckled. "I'll manage. I've spent enough time on planes to know how to make do." But even as he said the words, he felt a rush of excitement. This wasn't just another flight. This was an encounter that would change his life in ways he couldn't yet predict. Clint looked at him with a glint of amusement in his eyes. "You know, not many people would offer their seat to a stranger, let alone someone like me." Elon shrugged, trying to play it cool, but inside, he was buzzing with adrenaline. "I guess I've always believed in doing things a little differently." Clint smirked. "That's one way to put it. I'd call it A hell of a gesture. As the flight continued, the two men exchanged pleasantries, their conversation slowly drifting toward more personal matters. Elon found himself opening up to Clint in a way he hadn't done with anyone in years. It wasn't just about technology, rockets, or billion-dollar ventures. It was about life, struggles, and the human side of things. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt like he could truly be himself, without the weight of expectations hanging over him. Clint, in turn, shared stories of his long career, his experiences in Hollywood, and the lessons he'd learned along the way. There was a quiet wisdom in his words, a depth that Elon couldn't help but admire. It was clear that Clint had seen the highs and lows of life, and yet he remained grounded. As the plane soared through the sky, Elon began to realize something profound. The connection between them wasn't just about admiration or the oddity of the situation. It was about the shared understanding of what it meant to be at the top of the world, and yet still seek something more, something deeper. And just like that, the first-class cabin, once a place of opulence and isolation, became a space for an unlikely friendship to blossom. As the plane continued its journey, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this unexpected moment, was only the beginning of something much larger. He didn't know how or why, but he had a sense that his life was about to take a turn, and it all started with a simple decision to give up his seat. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had never been the type of person to shy away from taking risks. Whether it was building a car company from the ground up, launching rockets into space, or reimagining the future of energy, Elon was always driven by a relentless desire to push the boundaries of what was possible. But behind the headlines, the controversies, and the triumphs, there was a story that few knew about, a story that shaped the man who sat in the back of the plane, now reflecting on his own journey. Elon was born in Pretoria, South Africa, to a Canadian mother and a South African father. His childhood was far from the lavish life he would later know. It was a world of quiet discomfort and emotional distance. His father, Elon Musk, was a complicated man, brilliant yet emotionally distant, sometimes demanding, sometimes cold. Elon's mother, May Musk, on the other hand, was warm, supportive, and fiercely independent. She was an international model and dietitian who instilled in her children a sense of ambition and perseverance. But it was clear from an early age that Elon, even as a child, harbored a sense of isolation, a feeling that he was destined for something bigger than what was around him. His early years were marked by a love of books and a fascination with technology. At the age of 10, Elon bought his first computer, a Commodore VIC-20, and taught himself how to code. By the time he was 12, he had already created and sold a video game called Blaster for $500, a sum that seemed impossibly large for a kid with no real concept of money but an immense drive to make something of himself. But despite his precociousness, Elon often felt like an outsider. School was not easy for him. He was bullied relentlessly as a child, often the target of classmates who found his intellectual curiosity and social awkwardness odd. His awkwardness didn't just stem from his interests. It was his introverted, cerebral nature that set him apart. He wasn't interested in the typical childhood games or pursuits. Instead, he found solace in books, in learning, in creating. Elon's teenage years were a time of intense internal conflict. He had an intense desire to prove himself, but he also struggled with self-doubt and a growing feeling of alienation. By the time he reached high school, his parents had separated, adding another layer of complexity to his young life. Elon moved with his father to Canada, where he attended Queen's University for 2 years before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. It was at Penn that Elon began to take the steps that would ultimately define his future. He earned 2 degrees, one in physics and the other in economics, underlining his dual interests in both technology and business. However, his restless mind was never satisfied with the confines of academia. Elon was constantly thinking about the future, about what was possible, and about how to push humanity forward. He knew that his true calling wasn't going to be found in a classroom. It was out in the world, somewhere on the bleeding edge of technology and innovation. After graduation, he headed west to Silicon Valley, a place that would come to define his life in ways he could never have imagined. In 1995, he co-founded Zip2, a software company that provided online business directories and maps. It was a modest start, but it was only the beginning. He would later sell Zip2 to Compaq for nearly $300 million. Elon's first taste of success was intoxicating, but it wasn't enough. He had bigger dreams, dreams of changing the world, of revolutionizing industries, and of pushing humanity to new frontiers. In the years that followed, Elon founded X.com, an online payment company that would later become PayPal. Under his leadership, PayPal transformed the way the world did business online, and in 2002, it was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion in stock. By this point, Elon had amassed a fortune, but he wasn't content with just financial success. He was on a mission to change the world. Meanwhile, Elon had become involved in other ventures. In 2004, he joined Tesla Motors, a fledgling electric car company, as its chairman of the board. He would later take over as CEO, driving the company toward its mission of creating sustainable energy solutions. Despite many setbacks, financial struggles, and questions about whether Tesla would survive, Elon's unwavering belief in the company and its mission propelled it to become one of the most valuable automakers in the world. Elon Musk had become a household name. His ventures in space exploration, electric vehicles, and renewable energy had captured the world's imagination. He was the visionary billionaire, the man who was changing the future of humanity. But despite his success, there was always a feeling of isolation. He had gained the world, but he had lost something in the process: connections with others, the human element that had always been so important to him, even though he had struggled to express it. As he sat on the plane next to Clint Eastwood, Elon reflected on how far he had come, yet how much he still had to learn. His journey had taken him to the highest of heights, but it had also come with personal sacrifices and struggles that few outside of his inner circle knew about. Despite his outward success, Elon was still grappling with questions about what really mattered in life. His ambition had propelled him to the top, but it had also left him feeling distant from the people around him. And now, sitting next to Clint Eastwood, the man who had lived through decades of challenges, fame, and success, Elon began to feel that perhaps he was on the cusp of something else. Something more than rockets, more than cars, more than even technology itself. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected encounter was a sign that the next phase of his journey had already begun. The plane hummed steadily through the sky as Elon and Clint continued their conversation, the hours seeming to slip by unnoticed. What started as an unexpected meeting had gradually turned into something deeper, something that Elon wasn't prepared for. Clint, with his vast life experience and world-weary wisdom, had a way of making Elon rethink everything. The discussions ranged from the profound to the practical, what it meant to take risks, how to handle failure, and the importance of staying true to oneself despite the pressures of success. However, as the conversation unfolded, it wasn't just philosophical musings and life lessons that filled the air. It was also the sharp realization that Elon, in all his achievements, had never truly stopped to consider the emotional toll his journey had taken. It was easy to look at his empire, his countless accolades, and his fortune and think of it all as a symbol of triumph. But was that really all there was to it? As Clint shared stories from his storied career, tales of fighting for respect in a male-dominated industry, of his struggles with Hollywood, and of the deep satisfaction he found in directing, Elon began to feel something stir within him. Clint's stories weren't just about the movies or the fame. They were about his inner battles, his personal sacrifices, and the lessons he'd learned over decades of dedication. Elon listened intently, but with each passing minute, a question lingered in his mind. Had his journey been solely about technology and progress? Was his relentless ambition a manifestation of something deeper, perhaps something that was missing in his own life? It wasn't the first time Elon had grappled with these questions. Over the years, he had thrown himself into his work, often at the expense of his personal relationships. His marriages, his friendships, and even his connection with his children had all suffered because of the unrelenting demands of his career. He'd always told himself that it was worth it. After all, he was changing the world. But in moments like this, when he was sitting next to Clint Eastwood, the man who had seen and experienced more than most people could imagine, Elon couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, he had lost sight of something important. The conversation took a shift when Clint mentioned something that struck Elon to his core. You know, Elon, we can get so caught up in the things we're building, the projects we're obsessed with, that we forget about the people we're building them for. We think about success, but sometimes it's the journey, the connections we make along the way, that matter more than the end goal. Elon stiffened, his mind racing. The words felt like a punch to the gut. It was as if Clint had just pointed out the one thing Elon had always tried to avoid thinking about, the cost of his ambition. It was hard for him to deny the truth of Clint's words. Isn't that what it's all about? Clint continued, sensing the shift in Elon's mood. Finding a balance between what we create and who we become in the process. We all have our different roads, but it's those connections, those moments with the people we care about, that make the journey worthwhile. Don't you think? Elon looked out the window, his mind whirling. He'd always prided himself on his focus, on his ability to shut out distractions and push forward toward his goals. But now, for the first time in a long while, he questioned whether that focus had caused him to miss something far more important. Yeah, I guess I've always been so driven by what's next that I haven't paid enough attention to what I already have, Elon admitted, his voice quieter than usual. Clint leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. It's easy to get lost in the noise, especially when you're trying to change the world. But sometimes, the hardest thing is taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. And trust me, you'll find that everything else falls into place once you do. Elon nodded slowly, absorbing Clint's words. It was true. He had been so obsessed with his vision of the future that he'd neglected the present. His relationship with his family, with his friends, had always taken a back seat to his work. His children, though he loved them deeply, were often distant figures in his life, something he would later regret. As a father, he had always believed that his work would be enough, that his success would secure their future. But had he forgotten the importance of being present, of actually showing up for the people he loved? Just then, a sudden turbulence rattled the plane, bringing both men back to the present. The momentary discomfort caused Elon's thoughts to shift momentarily, but Clint's words had already lodged themselves deep in his mind. "I know what you're thinking," Clint said, his voice steady despite the jolt of the plane, "but you can't keep chasing the future without considering the present. Life has a funny way of catching up to you when you least expect it. Trust me on this one." Elon turned toward him, a serious look on his face. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. What's the point of all of this if I can't share it with the people who matter?" Clint gave him a knowing look. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The thing about being at the top is that you're always looking ahead, but you've got to remember to look around and down, too. You might just find the most important things you've been missing." The turbulence subsided as quickly as it had arrived, but the conversation lingered, heavy in the air. Elon knew that Clint was right. He had spent so much time pushing forward that he had neglected the things that mattered most. Now, sitting next to Clint Eastwood, the man who had not only built an empire but also maintained his sense of self along the way, Elon felt a pang of realization. The world he was building, the world he had devoted so much of his life to, had its own demands. But the people around him, the people he loved, needed him too. He needed to change, to adjust his perspective if he wanted to preserve those relationships. But how could he do that? How could he balance the relentless drive that had gotten him this far with the personal connections he so desperately needed? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Clint's voice broke through the silence. "It's not going to be easy. No one said it would be. But if you want to make it work, you've got to be willing to fight for it. And sometimes, fighting for the ones you love is harder than fighting for success." Elon took a deep breath. The weight of Clint's words settled over him. His journey was far from over, but it was clear that the real challenge wasn't just about rockets or electric cars. It was about something much more fundamental, about building the life he truly wanted, not just the one he had thought he should have. And as the plane continued to cruise through the skies, Elon's mind was already racing, trying to figure out how he would change his path, and whether or not he could find a way to balance it all. As the plane continued its journey, the conversation between Elon and Clint grew quieter, more reflective. The turbulence had passed, and the atmosphere in the cabin had settled. But Elon couldn't shake off the heaviness of the words Clint had shared with him. His mind raced through the implications of their conversation. He had spent so much of his life carving out a legacy in technology and space exploration, but now, for the first time in years, he was starting to see that his relentless drive might have cost him something far more valuable: human connection. Clint, sensing the weight of the moment, broke the silence. You know, Elon, we all have these pivotal moments in our lives. Sometimes they come when you least expect them, when you're at a crossroads or facing an unexpected challenge. It's in those moments that you find out who you really are. I've had my share of them, and it's always been about deciding which direction to go. But it's not always the easiest choice. Elon turned his head toward Clint, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? Clint looked out the window for a moment, his gaze distant, as if recalling memories from a far-off time. When I was younger, I had it all laid out. I wanted to be a director, to tell stories, to change the way people saw the world. But there were a lot of sacrifices along the way. There were moments when I had to decide between my career and my personal life. And let me tell you, there were times when I got that wrong. But it was those missteps that taught me the most about myself. Elon leaned forward, intrigued. And how did you find the balance? Clint's eyes met Elon's, filled with the calm certainty that came with decades of experience. You never really find perfect balance, but you learn how to shift your priorities when necessary. Sometimes you have to sacrifice for your dreams, but other times you need to sacrifice your dreams for the people who matter. Elon processed Clint's words. A part of him had always known that his journey wasn't just about technological triumphs, but the stakes of maintaining personal relationships were far higher than he had anticipated. Could he afford to take a step back and recalibrate his life? Or would his relentless drive eventually alienate him from everyone around him? The plane made an announcement about their approaching destination, and the seatbelt signs illuminated, signaling the final leg of their journey. Elon's thoughts, however, remained a whirlwind. His world had just been shaken in a way he hadn't anticipated. He wasn't just pondering the future of humanity anymore. He was grappling with his own humanity, with the parts of him that he had neglected for years. It wasn't long before the plane touched down at their destination. Elon gathered his things, still lost in thought, and nodded a quiet thanks to Clint for the conversation. They both made their way toward the terminal, the weight of their exchange still hanging in the air. As they stepped into the bustling airport terminal, Elon's phone buzzed with a message from one of his trusted SpaceX executives. Elon, we need to talk. Something urgent has come up. I think you need to be aware of it before we go any further. Elon's heart skipped a beat. His first instinct was to ignore it, to stay in the moment and focus on the lessons Clint had just imparted to him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this was something he had to address. I'll catch up with you later, Elon said, glancing at Clint, who nodded knowingly. It was as though Clint could sense that this was the moment Elon would be tested, that his journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that might have profound implications for his personal and professional life. Elon found a quiet corner of the terminal and read the message. Elon, I don't know how to say this, but there's been a serious issue with the latest rocket launch. We've encountered a failure in the propulsion system, and it's going to set us back significantly. The engineers are trying to figure it out, but we may need to delay our next mission. Elon's mind went into overdrive. SpaceX's future hung on the success of this mission, and any setback could jeopardize everything he had worked for. He had always pushed forward in the face of adversity, but now the stakes felt even higher. This wasn't just a technical failure. This was personal. He had invested so much of himself into SpaceX. Every failure, every setback felt like a reflection of his own shortcomings. Elon's chest tightened as he typed back a quick response. Get me the full details. I'll be on the next flight to the headquarters. As he hit send, Elon felt a surge of urgency. The pressure to maintain his empire, to keep pushing forward, was now clashing with the emotional weight of his conversation with Clint. He knew that a choice had to be made. He couldn't ignore the failure, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that he had been neglecting the very things that grounded him. For the first time in years, Elon felt truly torn. He had always prided himself on his ability to compartmentalize, to keep his personal life separate from his work. But Clint's words had cracked open a door to something deeper, something that he couldn't ignore anymore. As he stood up to make his way to his next flight, Elon realized that he was at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he couldn't yet fully understand. The failure at SpaceX was just one part of it. The larger question, the one that Clint had unknowingly raised, was whether he could balance the pursuit of his lofty dreams with the need for human connection. He could continue to chase the future, to pour all his energy into his companies, and hope that everything would work out. Or he could start looking around, taking stock of the people who mattered most, and begin the difficult process of building the relationships he had neglected for so long. As Elon made his way to the boarding gate, the noise of the airport faded into the background. He had come so far, and yet now he faced the hardest decision of his life, and it was one he could not avoid any longer. Elon sat in the back of the private jet, staring out the window as the miles between him and his destination grew shorter. His thoughts were a whirlwind of uncertainty, a mixture of fear and anticipation. He had just received the urgent message from SpaceX, and now he was on his way to the company's headquarters to figure out how to solve the crisis that had unexpectedly landed in his lap. But the crisis was only one part of the equation. The larger question still lingered. Was he really willing to face what Clint had opened up within him? Was he truly ready to reconsider his life's priorities? The sound of the jet engines hummed in the background, but Elon could barely focus on anything except the conversation he had had with Clint earlier. Clint's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes, you have to sacrifice for your dreams, but other times, you need to sacrifice your dreams for the people who matter. Elon had always been the kind of person who believed that success came from focusing solely on the goal. He was relentless, almost to a fault, in his pursuit of innovation. He had always been driven by the idea that the future of humanity was his responsibility, that he was the one to lead the charge into the next era of space travel, energy, and technology. But Clint's words had stirred something inside him that Elon couldn't ignore. Was it possible to continue to push forward while also holding on to the people and relationships that grounded him? Could he still be the visionary he wanted to be while maintaining the connections that truly mattered? Elon's phone buzzed once again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a new message from SpaceX. Elon, we've reviewed the data. The issue with the propulsion system is more severe than we initially thought. We might need to rethink the entire mission strategy. This could be the biggest setback we've faced in years. Elon stared at the message, his mind going blank. His heart sank as he processed the severity of the situation. He had built SpaceX from the ground up, and now, just when he thought he had everything under control, a failure like this threatened everything. Every inch of progress, every ounce of sacrifice, felt like it might slip through his fingers. He tapped out a quick response, trying to maintain his composure. I'm landing soon. Let's have a full briefing as soon as possible. We can fix this. But deep down, Elon knew that this wasn't just about fixing a technical problem. This was about fixing the bigger issue, finding a way to balance his ambition with his personal life, his relationships. Was he truly willing to make the changes necessary to rebuild the bridges he had burned with the people who mattered most? As the plane touched down and rolled to a stop, Elon gathered his things and walked off the tarmac, his mind a mess of conflicting emotions. SpaceX needed him, but so did his family. And Clint's words had dug into him like a splinter he couldn't remove. Was it really too late to change course, to prioritize the things that mattered most? Or had he already gone too far down this path? At the headquarters, Elon was immediately ushered into a conference room where a team of engineers and executives were waiting. The mood in the room was tense, and Elon could feel the weight of their expectations as he sat down. We've gone through every possibility, Elon, one of the lead engineers said, his voice tinged with frustration. The propulsion issue is more complex than we anticipated. If we don't solve this, we risk delaying the mission for months, maybe even years. Elon nodded, his mind racing. He was used to solving problems, big problems, technical problems. But this wasn't just a technical issue, it was a personal one. The question wasn't just about the next launch. It was about how far he was willing to go, not just for his company but for the people in his life. Let's get to work, Elon said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. We've faced setbacks before, and we'll face them again. But we don't stop. We push forward. He felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as his mind began to focus on the problem at hand. He had built SpaceX on the foundation of overcoming the impossible, and that same mindset would carry him through this moment. But even as he focused on the task, his thoughts kept drifting back to Clint's words and the life he had left behind. As the meeting continued, Elon found himself distracted by the thought of what might have been. Could he have been a better father? A better friend? Could he have maintained the personal connections that were now fading in the rearview mirror of his ambition? He was so deep in thought that he almost missed the shift in the conversation. Elon, the lead engineer, spoke again. We have an idea. It's risky, but it might work. If we re-engineer the propulsion system using a different material that's still under testing, we could salvage the mission. It's going to take time, but we'll need full resources from every department. Elon took a deep breath, weighing the options. This was the kind of challenge he thrived on. He had always embraced risk. But now, with everything else in his life starting to feel more fragile, he realized that risk had to be weighed carefully, not just for the sake of his company, but for the sake of his future. Let's do it, he said, his voice firm. But make sure everyone is on the same page. We can't afford to waste any time. The team nodded, and the meeting took on a more focused energy. Elon, for all his inner conflict, threw himself into the problem, working alongside his engineers to strategize the next steps. But as the hours passed and the room grew quieter, the weight of Clint's words pressed harder on him. It wasn't until the end of the meeting, when everyone had filed out and the room was empty except for Elon, that the emotional gravity of the situation truly hit him. He had just put everything he had into this mission, and yet, in the quiet moments that followed, the truth began to sink in. The most important things in his life, his children, his family, his connections, had been ignored for so long that he didn't know if he could ever repair them. Elon closed his eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. He knew this was a turning point. SpaceX was a part of him, but it wasn't all of him. The bigger question, the one Clint had raised, was whether he could ever balance both. Whether he could ever truly change course and start to focus on the things that mattered most, before it was too late. As the weight of that realization sank in, Elon's phone buzzed once more. It was a message from his son, Nevada. "Dad, I miss you. When are you coming home?" The simple message hit him like a punch in the chest. For the first time in years, Elon felt a surge of emotion, something he had kept buried beneath his ambition for so long. He stared at the screen for a long moment, knowing that the choices he made in the next few hours would define the rest of his life. Elon sat in the dimly lit conference room, his eyes locked on his phone, still staring at the message from Nevada. His son's simple request, "When are you coming home?" echoed in his mind, louder than anything else he had heard in years. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything that had happened in such a short amount of time. The room was quiet, the hum of the overhead lights barely audible as the SpaceX team continued to work in the background. But for Elon, the noise of the outside world had faded completely. It was as though he were in a vacuum, alone with his thoughts, his regrets, and his hopes. The weight of the decisions he had made, both personal and professional, pressed down on him with a force he had never fully acknowledged until now. He knew that he had neglected his family. The years of late nights, long meetings, and relentless pursuit of goals had taken their toll. He had pushed his personal life to the back burner, convinced that the sacrifices would be worth it in the end. That once SpaceX succeeded, once Mars was within reach, he would finally have the time to focus on the people who mattered. But as the message from Nevada stared back at him, Elon realized how much time he had already lost. His son was growing up, and he wasn't there. His relationships with his children, with his friends, and with the people closest to him had become strained or even distant. All the accomplishments, all the groundbreaking achievements, seemed insignificant when weighed against the idea of a life lived without the connections that truly grounded him. Elon, the voice of his lead engineer, pulled him back into the present. "We're ready to start moving forward with the revised propulsion system. We have a plan, but we'll need your final approval." Elon looked up from his phone, focusing on the team before him. His mind was still heavy, still clouded by the emotional turmoil he was facing. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't keep living like this. The cost of ignoring his personal life was becoming too great. The price of success, of always pushing forward, was no longer worth it if it meant sacrificing the people who mattered most. He stood up, walked to the front of the room, and addressed the team, his voice steadier than he felt inside. "Let's move forward with the plan," he said. "But I want everyone to know that we're not just focused on getting this mission right. We need to fix the things that have been broken. The world needs to see that we're not just a company of engineers. We're a team, and we have to be in this together. All of us, including the people who matter in our lives." There was a brief moment of silence before the team nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the weight of Elon's words. This was a pivotal moment, one where the future of SpaceX could hang in the balance, but also where Elon realized that his own personal transformation was necessary for the company to thrive in the long run. As the team got to work, Elon took a deep breath. His decision to move forward with the mission, despite the setbacks, wasn't just about saving SpaceX. It was about setting a new course for himself, one that wasn't solely defined by his work, but also by the relationships he had left behind. It was time to start rebuilding what had been neglected. The next few days were a blur of meetings, technical discussions, and late nights spent strategizing. Elon threw himself into the work with the same fervor he had always exhibited, but this time, something was different. Every decision he made, every problem he solved, he did so with the realization that the journey ahead wasn't just about technology. It was about people. It was about finding a balance between the mission to take humanity to the stars and the mission to reconnect with the people who had always been his foundation. Meanwhile, Elon's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from his ex-wife, Justine. "Are you coming to Nevada's birthday party next weekend?" He quickly typed a response, "I'll be there. I promise." It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in years, Elon felt a flicker of hope. Hope that he could repair the damage he had done. Hope that he could rebuild the connections he had lost. The road ahead would be difficult, and there would be no quick fix, but it was a road he was now willing to walk, with the determination to make things right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. SpaceX continued to work on the propulsion system, and the mission was slowly getting back on track. But for Elon, the biggest change wasn't in the technical achievements or the progress at the company. It was in the way he began to view his life. For the first time in years, he took weekends off. He spent more time with his children, reconnected with friends he had neglected, and even made an effort to be present at family gatherings. He still worked tirelessly, still pushed the boundaries of innovation, but he now understood that life wasn't just about success in the workplace. It was about balance. It was about the people who stood by him, through thick and thin. Elon's journey had been long, filled with setbacks and sacrifices, but it was in the quiet moments, in the reflection of his own life, that he began to see the true measure of his success. It wasn't in the rockets or the technology. It wasn't in the billions of dollars or the accolades. It was in the relationships he rebuilt, the love he rekindled, and the connection he found with the people who truly mattered. And as the SpaceX mission prepared for its next launch, Elon realized that the road ahead was full of endless possibilities. He had learned that no matter how high you reach, how far you go, or how many obstacles you overcome, the most important journey you will ever take is the one that leads you back to the people you love. He looked out of his office window one final time, the early morning sun casting a golden glow over the city below. There was a sense of peace within him now, a peace he had not felt in years. For the first time, he could truly say that he was ready for whatever came next. He had learned the most important lesson of all, that the stars were within reach, but so were the people who mattered most. Elon Musk had never been one for ordinary moments. In fact, he often felt that his life was a series of extraordinary events, highs and lows, relentless ambition, and innovative achievements that constantly pushed the boundaries of possibility. But as he sat in the familiar quiet of his office, a new realization began to settle over him. Life wasn't all about the future of technology, Mars colonization, or his revolutionary ambitions. Life was about the people around him, the ones who had supported him, loved him, and believed in him, even when he was too focused on the next big thing to notice them. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his daughter, Tosca. "Dad, when are you coming home?" I miss you. The simple, heartfelt message hit him harder than he expected. It was a wake-up call. Elon's heart ached as he thought of his children and how he had put his personal life on the back burner for far too long, always thinking that his work would eventually make everything worth it. The truth, however, was that no amount of success would replace the importance of being there for his family. He'd been trying to keep it together, managing both the pressure of SpaceX and the reality of being a distant father. But it was clear that this delicate balance was no longer working for him. There had to be a shift, a fundamental change that would allow him to embrace both his passions and his family. The journey that Clint Eastwood had inadvertently set in motion was far from over. It was just beginning. Elon tapped a quick reply to Tosca. Be there soon, sweetie. Promise. He set the phone down, exhaling deeply as he leaned back in his chair. It was time to make good on his promises. The tech world would always be there. SpaceX, Tesla, his ventures to Mars. But his family? They weren't guaranteed. Time had a funny way of slipping away, and he couldn't afford to let it slip any further. The next few days were spent reconnecting with the people he had put on the back burner. First, he spent time with his children, attending a few of their school events and making an effort to be present at dinner. He noticed the small things, the way his youngest son, Damien, smiled when he saw him come through the door, or how Tosca's eyes lit up when he gave her his full attention. There were challenges along the way, of course. The familiar guilt that had followed him for so long still lingered in the back of his mind, questioning whether he was doing enough. But for once, he allowed himself to silence that voice. He was here, now, and that was all that mattered. When the weekend arrived, Elon made his way to Nevada's birthday party, something he had promised he would attend. It was a small gathering, just family and a few close friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, and for the first time in ages, Elon felt the weight on his shoulders lift slightly as he looked around the room, surrounded by his children. Nevada, his youngest, ran up to him with excitement in his eyes. "Dad, look what I got for my birthday," he exclaimed, holding out a small toy rocket. Elon smiled, crouching down to his son's level. "I see that. A rocket? Huh? Maybe one day, we'll send this rocket to space. What do you think?" Nevada's eyes widened. "Really?" "Absolutely," Elon said, ruffling his son's hair. "You never know, buddy. The future is full of possibilities." He felt a deep sense of contentment as he watched his children interact, laughing and playing. It wasn't the biggest event he had ever attended, but it was the one that mattered most. The simple act of being there, present, fully engaged in his children's lives, brought him a sense of peace he hadn't realized he was missing. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the house quieted, Elon sat down with Justine. It had been years since they'd had a conversation like this, calm, open, and devoid of the tension that had once defined their relationship. "You've been different lately," Justine said, studying him. "I can see it in your eyes. What's going on, Elon?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his own vulnerability. "I'm trying to make things right. With you, with the kids, with myself." Justine's expression softened. "I can see that. But remember, it's not just about fixing the past. It's about moving forward. We can't change what happened, but we can make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes." Elon nodded, understanding the truth in her words. "I've always believed that the work I do is the most important thing. But now I'm seeing that balance is key. I've neglected so much of what truly matters. You, the kids, the people who've always been there. And I've been blinded by my ambition." "You've always been driven, Elon," Justine said, her tone understanding. "But it's not too late. You're here now. That's what matters." Her words resonated deeply with him. He didn't know if it was too late to fix everything he had broken, but he knew he had to try. And trying was enough for now. It was a start. The next few weeks were filled with more moments of connection. Elon made an effort to attend family dinners, to be present for school events, and most importantly, to listen. He realized how much he had missed in the rush to conquer the next big thing. There were so many moments, small moments, that were now filled with meaning. At work, things were progressing smoothly too. The propulsion system for SpaceX's next mission was on track, and the company was on the verge of making history again. But this time, the victories felt different. They weren't hollow. They were shared, with the people who mattered most by his side. One afternoon, as he walked through the halls of SpaceX headquarters, Elon found himself thinking about Clint Eastwood again. The legendary actor's words still rang in his ears, urging him to reconsider what success truly meant. Clint's simple act of humility, giving up his seat for someone else, had shifted something inside Elon that he hadn't expected. He had been chasing the wrong things for too long. It was time for a new path, one where he could have both: the groundbreaking innovations that would change the world and the personal connections that made life meaningful. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but Elon knew that for the first time in a long while, he was ready for whatever came next. And with that, he stepped forward, not just as the founder of SpaceX or the CEO of Tesla, but as a man who had learned to balance ambition with love, drive with family, and dreams with reality. This was something he had never fully understood before, despite the countless hours he'd poured into his work. Now, after months of reconnecting with his family, spending time with his children, and learning to listen to those around him, he realized that the true meaning of success extended far beyond his work. Elon's life was changing. He knew that the work he did, the space exploration, the electric revolution, was important. But he had also learned that being there for the people who mattered, making real connections, and showing up when it counted was equally important. And as he took a step back to reflect on this, a new fire ignited inside him, one that blended his passion for innovation with a renewed commitment to the people he loved. It wasn't long before Elon's personal transformation began to ripple through the people around him, especially the ones closest to him. Justine noticed the difference first. She had seen the man who was consumed by work, the one who never stopped for a second to ask if everything was okay, the one who seemed like a ghost in his own life. But now, there was a warmth to him, a softness in his approach that had been absent for years. One evening, as the two of them sat together, just talking, a rare occurrence these days, Justine looked at Elon thoughtfully. "You know," she said, her voice calm and reflective, "I've noticed something. You're more present, more open." Elon smiled, a hint of relief washing over him. "I guess I'm finally learning to listen. To you, to the kids, to myself." Justine raised an eyebrow. "It's a long way from the man I married." He chuckled softly. "I suppose so. But I think I'm finally realizing that the man I became wasn't the man I wanted to be." There was a pause, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. Justine let out a long sigh and then reached over, resting her hand on his. "I know it hasn't been easy for you, for us, but I think you're on the right path. Just don't lose sight of it, okay?" Elon nodded. "I won't. I can't." Over the following weeks, this new perspective continued to transform his life. Elon didn't just become a better father, but a better leader. SpaceX's innovations moved forward, but now, with the understanding that everything he did, every project, every breakthrough, was intertwined with the relationships he had built, the people he cared for, and the community he was a part of. His newfound sense of balance, of the importance of family, also trickled down to his employees. They noticed a change in his demeanor, the way he interacted with them. Elon was no longer the distant, cold figure who hovered above everyone else, driving them to work harder, to push boundaries at any cost. Instead, he was more collaborative, more human. His team could see that he was genuinely invested in not just the success of the company, but in their well-being too. One afternoon, while reviewing the plans for the next Mars mission, Elon sat down with his core leadership team. They had just reached an important milestone, one that would bring them closer to their goal of making humanity a multiplanetary species. But instead of diving straight into the technicalities, Elon took a moment to address the team, to acknowledge their hard work. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice steady but with an emotional undertone. "But let's not forget why we're doing this. It's not just for the future of humanity. It's for the people who believe in us. It's for our families. It's for the generations to come. And it's for the ones who may never see it, but who will feel the impact of everything we're building today." His words hung in the air, heavier than any technical brief he had ever given. His team exchanged looks, nodding. They understood. It wasn't just about launching rockets. It was about what those rockets represented: hope, progress, and a shared vision. This wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement. And Elon's transformation had sparked something deeper than mere business. It was a commitment to the people and the world they were trying to shape. As SpaceX prepared for another monumental launch, Elon found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He thought about Clint Eastwood, about the moment when the legendary actor had given up his seat, a simple act of humility that had resonated with him far more deeply than any grand gesture ever could. In that moment, Elon understood. It wasn't about grand achievements, fancy cars, or groundbreaking technologies. It was about the small moments, the ones that mattered to the people around you. It was about humility, about recognizing that no matter how high you reach, there are still people who need you. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful thing he could offer the world. The night before the Mars mission was set to launch, Elon stood outside, looking up at the stars. He had always looked to the stars for inspiration, but now they seemed different. They weren't just the next frontier. They represented something more. They represented the future. And that future wasn't just in the rockets or the technology. It was in the lives they would touch, the people they would inspire, and the connections they would create. Tomorrow, we make history, he said softly to himself. But today, I make sure the people I love know I'm here. I'm here with them. I'm here for them. As he turned and walked back inside, his phone buzzed with a message from Nevada. "Can't wait to see you, Dad." Elon smiled, slipping the phone into his pocket. The ripple effect had begun, and he was finally ready to embrace it with all his heart. Elon Musk had always been a man of vision. He had made history by launching rockets into space, revolutionizing the automobile industry with Tesla, and dreaming of a future where humanity could become a multiplanetary species. His name was synonymous with innovation, and his legacy seemed destined to be one of the greatest in history. But now, as the launch of the next Mars mission loomed closer, Elon began to wonder what legacy truly meant. It wasn't the rockets. It wasn't the cars. It wasn't even the technology that he would leave behind that mattered the most. The more Elon thought about it, the more he realized that his legacy wasn't just about what he had built. It was about the people whose lives he had touched along the way. It was about how his work, his choices, and his actions had affected those closest to him. The space missions, the ambitious goals, the groundbreaking ideas, those were just the surface. What mattered more was how he made people feel, how he made them believe in something greater than themselves. The day before the launch, as Elon stood before the SpaceX team in the control room, preparing for the most significant moment in the company's history, he felt a pang of emotion that he hadn't expected. The entire team was working tirelessly to ensure everything was ready. It was a well-oiled machine, each person playing a pivotal role in this monumental event. And yet, as he stood there, the thought of his family, of his children, flooded his mind. The past few months had been transformative, and now, with the biggest mission yet ahead of him, he realized that there was so much more to life than the rush of innovation. Elon, Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and COO, called to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. "We're ready for the final checks. You okay?" He nodded, offering a faint smile. "Yeah, just thinking about everything that's led up to this moment. Not just the mission, but what comes after." Gwynne raised an eyebrow. "After?" Elon chuckled softly, rubbing his forehead. "The mission will happen, and it'll be groundbreaking, of course. But what happens afterward? Will people remember the technology? The rockets? Or will they remember what we did here, how we helped change the course of history for humanity?" Gwynne glanced around at the team, who were all focused on their tasks. "They'll remember both. The tech, the mission, the people. All of it. You've done something that most people thought was impossible." Elon's eyes shifted toward the control screens, where engineers and scientists were monitoring every detail of the mission. But his mind was still elsewhere, on the future, on the legacy he was building, and whether he was leaving behind something truly meaningful. "I've been thinking a lot about what kind of legacy I want to leave," Elon continued, his voice quiet, almost introspective, "about how I want to be remembered, not just as a tech mogul or a business leader, but as a person. A father, a partner, a friend." Gwynne considered his words before nodding slowly. "You know, you've already built a pretty solid legacy. but it's never too late to make sure it's the one you want. Elon didn't respond right away. He was used to people admiring his vision, his intellect, and his ability to push the limits of what was possible. But he didn't feel fulfilled by the accolades anymore. It was the personal connections that he had built, the family he had rediscovered, the people who had supported him in ways he hadn't fully understood until now, that mattered most. Later that night, after all the final checks had been completed, Elon found himself alone in the quiet of his office. The countdown to the mission was imminent, but he needed some time to reflect before the next big step. He opened his laptop and scanned through some old emails and messages. His inbox was filled with updates, reports, and the usual corporate banner, but he paused on one message, an email from his late friend and mentor, Steve Jobs. He'd kept the message for years, even though he never spoke of it to anyone. The email was simple, but it had stuck with him since he first read it. In it, Steve wrote, "Don't get lost in the future, Elon. It's easy to get caught up in the quest to build the next big thing. But remember, legacy isn't about the next big thing. It's about how the people around you feel, how they are impacted by your work, and how they grow because of it. Don't forget to stay grounded." The words were a reminder to not lose sight of what really mattered. His legacy, it seemed, wasn't in the rockets or the electric cars. It was in the way he made people feel, the way he inspired others, and the way he left his mark on the hearts of those who mattered most. With a deep breath, Elon closed the laptop and stood up. The mission was still on track. The world was waiting, but so were his children, his family. And that was what mattered now. Tomorrow, the world would witness history as SpaceX's Mars mission took flight. But for him, history was also being made in the smaller moments, the ones he shared with the people he loved. As the launch hour approached, Elon made a quick call to Justine. Her voice brought him comfort, grounding him in the moment. "Hey," he said softly, "I just wanted to remind you that I'm thinking about you, about the kids. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm grateful for everything." Justine's voice was warm and steady. "I know, Elon, and I'm proud of you. But don't forget, you're not doing this alone. We're all in this with you. You've always had our support." Elon smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. The weight of legacy wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about the quiet moments of connection, the deep relationships that sustained him, and the love he had for his family. As he prepared to join the team at the control center, Elon glanced at the stars outside his office window once more. There was no turning back now. The mission would proceed, and it would likely be another landmark in his career. But no matter what happened, he was finally ready to embrace the legacy he wanted. Not the one dictated by his ambitions, but the one shaped by the people he loved and who had always been there for him. And in that moment, Elon Musk understood something that had eluded him for so long. The greatest legacy he could leave was the one that made a difference in the lives of those he cherished. The hours leading up to the Mars mission were the most intense of Elon Musk's life. The control room buzzed with activity as engineers and scientists worked seamlessly to ensure every detail was perfect. Yet, amid the whirlwind of final preparations, Elon felt an undeniable calm. Perhaps it was the result of his recent personal reflections, or the sense that, at last, he had found a deeper purpose in his work. Whatever it was, he had an inner peace he had never experienced before. Sitting quietly in a corner of the control room, Elon watched the hustle around him. He had always been someone who thrived under pressure, who could focus with laser-like intensity even as the world seemed to swirl around him. But today, there was something different. The pressure felt distant, almost like a faint hum in the background. Instead, his thoughts were centered on the people in the room, the ones who had made this moment possible. His team, his family, the friends who had supported him through the years. Elon had often prided himself on his ability to push boundaries, to think beyond what was possible. And yet, he now understood that the greatest breakthroughs weren't just technological, they were relational. The strength of the relationships he had built over the years was what had carried him to this moment. It was these connections that had given him the strength to overcome setbacks, to rise above failures, and to remain focused on his vision. As he stood up and approached the mission console, a familiar voice broke through his reverie. "Elon, everything is set. The launch is just minutes away," Gwynne Shotwell said, her tone professional but warm. She had been by his side through every major moment in SpaceX's history, and in many ways, she was the steady force that balanced his relentless drive. Elon nodded, his gaze meeting hers. Thanks, Gwen. This means more than I can put into words. You don't have to put it into words, she said with a smile. We all know what it means. For a brief moment, Elon allowed himself to take in the scene. His team was ready, their faces lit with the quiet determination that had defined their journey together. The countdown clock on the large screen above them ticked away, its steady rhythm serving as a reminder of how far they had come. Elon, Gwen added, her voice lower now, you've created something incredible here. And no matter what happens, this is a huge moment. For humanity. For SpaceX. For you. Her words settled over him like a comforting weight. He had spent so many years chasing after what seemed like the impossible, but now, as the launch approached, he realized that he had already achieved something extraordinary. Not just with rockets, but with people. Yeah, he said, his voice soft but filled with resolve. It's not just about getting to Mars. It's about everything we've learned along the way. It's about the journey, not just the destination. As the final countdown began, Elon took one last look at his phone, which had been buzzing with messages throughout the day. The last one was from his children. Good luck, Dad. We're watching. We're so proud of you. His heart swelled as he read their words. For all the talk of Mars and the stars, these simple messages from his children brought him more joy than anything else. In that moment, he understood that success wasn't about conquering the cosmos. It was about creating a legacy that lasted beyond any one person or mission. The final seconds ticked down, and Elon felt the room around him hold its collective breath. Every person in that control room had put their heart and soul into this mission, and now it was time for it to take flight. 3, 2, 1, lift off, the announcer called, and in that instant, a rush of exhilaration filled the room as the rocket began its ascent toward the heavens. Elon watched as the rocket lifted off with a force and grace that seemed almost unreal. He had seen launches before, but this one felt different. This one felt like a culmination of everything that had come before it. The countless hours of work, the sacrifices, the failures, and the triumphs. It was the moment of a lifetime, not just for him, but for everyone involved. As the rocket soared into the sky, Elon felt a deep sense of pride. Not for himself, but for his team, for humanity. This was a moment that would go down in history, a moment that would change the course of human destiny. But as the rocket disappeared into the clouds, heading for the red dust of Mars, something else was happening too. The mission wasn't just about the future of space exploration. It was about the future of human connection, about how the work they did together could inspire a new generation of dreamers and doers, people who believed that anything was possible if they dared to reach for the stars. In the days that followed, the news of the successful launch spread like wildfire. Headlines flooded news sites, social media buzzed with excitement, and people from around the world watched in awe as the rocket made its way toward its destination. It was a historic moment, one that would be remembered for generations to come. Yet, despite the global attention and praise, Elon found himself reflecting on something deeper. As he looked out at the evening sky, his thoughts returned to his family, to his children, and to the people who had supported him throughout his journey. The success of the mission was important, but what mattered more was how it had brought them closer together. How it had opened up new possibilities for their future, both in space and here on Earth. Later that evening, as Elon sat at home with Justine, he found himself once again thinking about the legacy he was building. It wasn't just the incredible achievements, the technological feats, or the groundbreaking missions. It was about the impact he had on the people around him, the way he inspired others to dream, and the lessons he had learned along the way. You know, Justine said softly, I've never seen you so at peace. Elon smiled, a true, content smile that reached his eyes. I think I finally get it. The real mission was never about rockets or Mars. It was about the connections we make, the people we lift up along the way. Justine reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. And the legacy you leave behind will be one of love, inspiration, and hope. Elon looked at her, the weight of her words settling over him. Yeah, he said quietly. I think that's the most important thing of all. As the night sky stretched above them, Elon felt a sense of peace he had never known. The rocket had reached its destination, but his true journey, the one that mattered most, was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The launch had been a success, but the journey that followed was even more profound than Elon Musk had imagined. As the Mars mission progressed and the world followed each milestone with bated breath, something unexpected happened. The ripple effects of the mission began to extend far beyond the boundaries of SpaceX, reaching into communities, families, and individuals in ways Elon had never anticipated. His legacy was no longer just about technology, it was about change on a global scale. Elon had always been driven by the idea of pushing humanity forward, of reaching for the stars. But now, he realized that the impact of the mission wasn't just about the destination. It was about the inspiration it had sparked in others. People, from young students to seasoned engineers, were talking about space exploration in a way they never had before. Dreams that seemed far-fetched had suddenly become attainable, and the world was filled with a renewed sense of possibility. "I can't believe it," Gwen said one afternoon as she walked into Elon's office, a huge smile on her face. "I just got off a call with an elementary school in Chicago. They've been using our mission as a learning tool. The kids are obsessed. They're already talking about becoming astronauts or engineers." Elon looked up from his desk, a sense of warmth filling him. "That's incredible. It's exactly what we wanted, isn't it? To inspire the next generation to think bigger." "It's more than that," Gwen replied. "It's not just about inspiring them. It's about showing them that they can be part of something bigger than themselves. You've given them a vision, and now they're running with it." Elon's mind raced. He had spent so many years focused on the mission itself, the rockets, the technology, the goals. But now, seeing the impact it had on these children, he understood that he had created something that would outlive any spacecraft or technological breakthrough. He had ignited a passion for exploration, for curiosity, for innovation, in people all over the world. Later that week, Elon gave a talk at a gathering of young engineers and aspiring entrepreneurs, hoping to share his experiences and motivate them to take the risks he had. As he stood before the crowd, the energy in the room was palpable. There was a sense of anticipation, of excitement. They didn't just want to hear about his work. They wanted to understand how to do what he had done. "You know," Elon began, pausing as he surveyed the eager faces in the crowd, "there's no secret to it. The key is to never stop asking why, and to never stop pushing for something that seems impossible, because that's where the magic happens." The crowd responded with a cheer. But Elon wasn't done. His eyes glinted with something deeper now. "I didn't start SpaceX because I wanted to be famous, or even to change the world. I started it because I saw a future where we could make life multiplanetary. I saw a world where we could push beyond what was comfortable, and I knew it would take everyone, to get there. And I'm telling you, if you have a dream, if you believe in something bigger than yourself, there's nothing you can't achieve." The energy in the room soared. Young engineers raised their hands, asking questions about how to turn big ideas into reality. Aspiring entrepreneurs wondered about the best ways to start a company and raise funds for their visions. Elon answered each one with a mix of humor, humility, and clarity. He wasn't just giving advice, he was offering hope. By the end of the session, something profound had shifted in the room. People didn't just leave inspired, they left determined. The kind of determination that Elon had once felt when he first founded SpaceX. The kind of determination that led to moments like the Mars mission launch. Later that evening, as he sat alone in his office reflecting on the day's events, Elon's thoughts wandered back to the legacy he had once questioned. It had always been about reaching for the stars, about making humanity a spacefaring civilization. But now, he understood that the true legacy was about inspiring people to believe in their own potential, to push beyond the limits of their imaginations, and to create something that would last long after they were gone. "Elon," Gwen's voice interrupted his thoughts, "there's someone here to see you. A young woman, says she's an engineer with a proposal she wants to pitch to you." Elon raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Send her in." A few minutes later, a young woman in her mid-20s walked into his office. She had an aura of quiet confidence, but there was a spark in her eyes that reminded him of himself when he first started. She shook his hand firmly, her grip strong yet measured. "Mr. Musk," she said with a smile, "thank you for taking the time to meet with me. My name is Emily, and I've been working on a project that I believe could revolutionize sustainable energy. I wanted to pitch it to you because I think it aligns with the work you've done at Tesla and SpaceX." Elon smiled, leaning forward in his chair. "I'm all ears, Emily. What do you have for me?" She proceeded to outline her idea, a new form of energy storage that could make renewable energy far more efficient and accessible to the masses. Elon listened intently, his mind processing the possibilities. As Emily spoke, Elon's thoughts kept returning to the same point. This was what mattered. This was why he had pushed so hard, why he had risked so much. It wasn't just about the rockets or the cars or the missions. It was about creating a world where people like Emily could take their ideas and bring them to life. A world where innovation wasn't limited by resources or by the people in charge, but by the dreams and determination of the next generation. When she finished her pitch, Elon stood up, his eyes bright with interest. "Emily, I love it. Let's make this happen. You've got my support." The excitement in her eyes was palpable. "Thank you so much, Mr. Musk. This means everything to me." As she left the office, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. The ripple effects of the Mars mission weren't just about inspiring people to dream big. They were about enabling those dreams to come true. Space exploration, sustainable energy, transportation, and technology. They were all pieces of a much bigger puzzle. But it was the people, the innovators, the dreamers, the doers, who would ultimately solve it. And in that moment, Elon Musk realized that his legacy was no longer just about the monumental achievements. It was about the countless people who would take his vision and run with it, carrying the torch forward long after he was gone. It was about creating a world where the impossible became possible, not just for a few, but for everyone. As the weeks passed, the world continued to watch SpaceX's Mars mission with anticipation. With each passing day, the rocket traveled further into space, sending back valuable data that would shape humanity's understanding of the universe. The global excitement reached fever pitch, and Elon found himself swept up in the tide of possibilities. Yet, there was something even more profound happening beneath the surface. While the Mars mission and its technological breakthroughs were the focal point, the real change was in how people viewed the future. A silent revolution was unfolding. People who had once been skeptical about space exploration, renewable energy, and the idea of creating a sustainable future were now seeing the possibility of something better. Elon's work, once seen as a long shot, was becoming a blueprint for the future. In every corner of the world, people were starting to believe that they, too, could make a difference. The ripple effect was growing stronger, and it was beginning to change lives in ways Elon hadn't anticipated. A simple tweet or a statement in an interview could spark a wave of creativity and action. It wasn't just engineers or scientists who were inspired. Everyday people, from teachers to artists, were finding new ways to contribute to the global movement of progress. As SpaceX continued its mission, these individuals and communities were finding ways to turn ideas into reality. One particular group that caught Elon's attention was a group of high school students in California who had started a project to design a self-sustaining home. They had no funding, no formal training, but they had one thing: determination. They had followed SpaceX's progress closely, feeling the excitement from the mission. Inspired by Elon's commitment to making life multiplanetary, they had decided to use their limited resources to build a model of a home that could thrive in harsh, resource-limited environments. An idea that could eventually be applied to Mars, but could also make a difference here on Earth. The project was modest, nothing more than a few makeshift models and rudimentary systems, but it had a heart, an unmistakable sense of purpose. Elon received a letter from their teacher, asking if he might be able to meet with them and provide some guidance. Why not? Elon thought. If they're dreaming this big, they deserve a chance to be heard. The next week, Elon drove out to the school. He wasn't sure what to expect, but when he entered the classroom, he was greeted by a group of wide-eyed teenagers who were so full of passion that it nearly overwhelmed him. "Mr. Musk, One of the students, a girl named Sophia, said, "We're so glad you could come. We've been following everything you're doing. Your Mars mission, your electric cars, the rocket launches. You've changed the way we think about what's possible." Elon smiled, feeling a familiar spark in his chest. It was the same excitement he had felt when he was their age, when he had first dreamed of space and the stars. "Well, I think you all have something amazing here. Tell me about the project." Sophia led him over to a large table where a model of their sustainable home stood. It was basic, but impressive in its scope. Solar panels covered the roof, and the walls were made from recycled materials they had scavenged from around the school. A water filtration system was designed to capture rainwater, and the electricity came from the energy they harvested through solar. "This is our prototype," Sophia said proudly. "We know it's not perfect yet, but we're learning. We want to create something that works for Earth, but also for Mars one day." Elon looked over the design with interest. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of promise. "This is impressive," he said after a moment. "What you've built here could be part of the future of sustainable living. I see a lot of potential in this." The students beamed with pride, but it was clear they wanted more than praise. They wanted direction. "We don't know where to go next," one of the students, Ryan, said. "We've learned everything we could online, but we don't know how to take this idea to the next level. We want to do something that could change the world. But we need resources, mentorship, and most importantly, belief that it's possible." Elon sat quietly for a moment, taking it all in. These were young people who had seen the future not as a set of insurmountable challenges, but as a canvas for creativity and innovation. They had taken their passion for space and sustainability and turned it into something real. The spirit they embodied was the same one that had driven him to start SpaceX in the first place. "I believe in you," Elon said, his voice steady, "and I'm going to help you. What you're doing here is exactly what the world needs: vision, determination, and the courage to try something new." He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to one of his colleagues at Tesla, asking them to connect with the students and help them refine their project. Within minutes, the wheels were in motion. "You'll have the resources you need," Elon said. "But remember, this is just the beginning. The real work is in the small steps. And you've already made that first step. Now, you've got to keep going." Sophia and her classmates were overjoyed, and they spent the rest of the afternoon talking with Elon about the future of sustainable energy, space exploration, and the next steps for their project. What began as a simple conversation in a classroom would soon evolve into something much bigger. Their dreams were no longer confined to a classroom. They were part of a global movement, and Elon had just given them the spark to keep going. As he left the school that day, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about the mission to Mars or the success of his companies. The true power of change came from the people he had inspired, from the small, quiet victories that happened every day in classrooms, communities, and homes all around the world. The Mars mission was only a small part of something far greater, a revolution in the way people viewed the future. And as the ripples of that change continued to spread, Elon felt confident that humanity was on the right path. This was just the beginning. The excitement surrounding SpaceX's Mars mission continued to grow, but Elon Musk knew that the journey to the Red Planet was far from simple. Behind the headlines, the glamorous rocket launches, and the triumphs, there were challenges lurking in the background. Challenges that threatened to derail everything they had worked for. The public rarely saw the cracks behind the scenes, but they were there. Even with the mission progressing smoothly in terms of technology and data, the pressure was mounting. Elon was facing resistance from unexpected places: government regulators, established aerospace companies, and even some members of the public who didn't share his belief in the mission's importance. The pace at which things were moving had raised concerns among some critics, who questioned whether it was too soon to prioritize space travel over solving Earth's immediate problems. One evening, as Elon sat at his desk, poring over mission data, he received a call from Gwen. "Elon," she began, her voice steady but tinged with concern, "we've been getting pushback from the EPA and some other regulatory bodies. They're questioning whether we're moving too fast with our plans for Mars. There's also a new proposal on the table that would significantly delay our launches." Elon leaned back in his chair, the weight of the conversation sinking in. "How serious is it?" Serious enough, Gwen replied. They're demanding more testing, more reviews, more paperwork. The regulatory hurdles are stacking up. And it's not just the government. Some private companies, too. The big players in aerospace aren't thrilled about the competition SpaceX has created. Elon ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He'd anticipated opposition, of course. It came with the territory. But this was different. These weren't just technical or engineering challenges. These were ideological. These were people who didn't believe in the vision he had for humanity. They didn't see what he saw. And that was the hardest part to swallow. It's always the same, isn't it? Elon muttered under his breath. When you push the boundaries, when you try to do something no one thinks is possible, the world pushes back. Gwen was silent for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice resolute. Elon, we've faced setbacks before. We've been told no over and over again. But you've always found a way to keep going. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we can't let them stop us now. Elon took a deep breath. Her words rang true. There had been so many moments when SpaceX had been on the brink of collapse, but it had always been the belief in something greater that had kept them going. The idea of reaching Mars, of creating a future where humanity was not bound to Earth, that vision was worth fighting for. I know, he said quietly. I know we can't give up, but this time, it's different. These aren't just people trying to stop us. These are the ones who hold the keys to the future of space travel. If we don't play their game, we risk everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Gwen spoke again, her voice more determined than ever. Then we play their game, but we do it on our terms. Elon smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that if there was anyone who could navigate the obstacles ahead, it was SpaceX. They had always thrived in adversity. It was time to take on this new challenge and show the world that nothing could stop them. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and endless strategy sessions. Elon and his team worked tirelessly to address the concerns of the regulators, compiling data, conducting additional tests, and putting forward new proposals. It was a delicate dance, one that required them to balance their ambitious goals with the bureaucracy of the system. But as the days turned into weeks, something remarkable happened. Despite the challenges, SpaceX's efforts started to make an impact. Some of the regulatory bodies softened their stance, recognizing the importance of the mission to the future of humanity. Others were swayed by the data and the innovative solutions SpaceX had presented. It wasn't smooth sailing, but the tide was slowly turning in their favor. Still, the resistance wasn't over. Elon had to confront the reality that not everyone in power saw the long-term value of space exploration. There were still those who believed that the money spent on Mars missions could be better spent solving problems on Earth, poverty, climate change, economic inequality. It was a valid argument, and one that Elon didn't take lightly. But as he reflected on the bigger picture, Elon understood that humanity needed a vision to rally behind, a vision of something greater than the challenges of the present. The Mars mission wasn't just about reaching another planet. It was about pushing the limits of human potential, about showing the world that no challenge was too great to overcome. That night, as he walked out of SpaceX headquarters, Elon felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The battles he was fighting now weren't just about technology or business. They were about changing the very way people thought about the future. But as he stepped into his car, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had faced these battles before, and if there was one thing he knew for certain, it was that he would never back down from a fight for what he believed in. The road ahead was still filled with uncertainty, but Elon was ready. Because, in his heart, he knew that what they were doing wasn't just about rockets and Mars. It was about humanity's future. And nothing, not even the hardest of battles, would stop him from seeing that future come to life. The days following the regulatory battles were a whirlwind for Elon. Each moment seemed to slip through his fingers as he juggled the multiple aspects of the SpaceX mission, the unforeseen obstacles that cropped up daily, and the increasing pressure to deliver results that would live up to the immense expectations set by the public and his own team. But amid the chaos, a quieter force was pulling him forward, the relentless call of the unknown. It was in these moments of quiet reflection, late at night in his office, that Elon found himself thinking not just of Mars, but of the bigger picture. The first launch to the Red Planet, the hopes, the risks, the challenges, it was all just a stepping stone. The real goal, the one that kept him up at night, was humanity's future beyond Earth, across the stars, to other worlds. Elon, Gwen's voice pulled him from his reverie as she entered his office, her presence always a grounding force. I've been looking over the latest projections. The mission is still on track, but there's something we need to talk about. The team is pushing hard for more innovation in the Starship technology. They're saying that we're approaching a breakthrough, but we're also at a crossroads. Elon looked up from the monitors, his gaze sharp, tired, but focused. Breakthroughs are always a double-edged sword. What's the problem? Gwen hesitated for a moment. It's not so much a problem, but we're pushing the boundaries so far that we're in uncharted territory. We're at the point where we need to make a decision. Either we stick with our current technology and wait for the next iteration, or we go all in on something bigger. A system that could change everything. A quiet tension settled in the room. Elon knew this moment was inevitable. Whenever they reached a critical juncture, where the dream was just within reach, it was time to make a choice. A risk, a leap of faith, was required to push humanity forward. What do you think? Elon asked, leaning forward in his chair. I think we have to take the risk, Gwen said. We've been doing it this whole time, haven't we? Taking risks. But this is different. This new idea is ambitious. It's untested. But if it works, it will change everything, faster, more efficiently. And we'll be ready to send the next crew to Mars sooner than we expected. Elon stared out the window of his office, where the sprawling view of Hawthorne, California, stretched out under the fading glow of the setting sun. The future was always just a step away, but each step was more dangerous, more uncertain than the last. The idea of venturing into the unknown wasn't just part of the mission. It was the essence of progress. It was what propelled him forward. I've always said the greatest risk is not taking any risk, Elon said slowly, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. We've come this far. We've already overcome so much. If we hold back now, we might as well turn the rocket around and head back to Earth. Gwen nodded in agreement. Then we go all in. Let's make it happen. Elon felt a rush of energy, the clarity of purpose returning. There was no turning back now. The mission wasn't just about launching rockets. It was about revolutionizing humanity's future. Space was the canvas, and they were the artists. Days turned into weeks, and the pace of work accelerated. The engineers and scientists at SpaceX worked day and night to develop the new technology that would take Starship to the next level. As expected, there were hurdles. They ran into complications with the heat shield material. Testing failed more than once, and there were moments when it felt like the goal was slipping further out of reach. But Elon's resolve never wavered. He pushed harder, demanding innovation at every turn. He called in his best engineers, had late-night brainstorming sessions, and spent countless hours reviewing the data, tweaking the designs. The breakthrough had to come. For him, it wasn't just about SpaceX. It was about humanity's potential to reach out and touch the stars. It wasn't long before the team made a breakthrough. The new heat shield technology, which had seemed impossible just weeks earlier, was ready for testing. It was a moment of triumph for SpaceX, but Elon knew that the real work was just beginning. They had to prove it worked, in conditions that simulated the intense heat and pressure of reentry. They needed to push the limits of what they had created. The first test flight of the newly enhanced Starship was set for a day that Elon would never forget. He stood with Gwen and the rest of the SpaceX team in the control room, watching the countdown clock tick closer to zero. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of excitement, anxiety, and anticipation. "This is it," Gwen said quietly, looking at Elon. "Are you ready?" Elon gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "I've been ready for this moment my entire life." The countdown reached zero, and the rocket soared into the sky. It was a flawless launch, smooth, precise, and powerful. Elon watched with bated breath as the Starship ascended, carrying their dreams and ambitions higher and higher. As the rocket reached its peak altitude, the team's focus shifted to reentry. This was the moment of truth. If the heat shield failed, the mission would be a loss, and they would have to start over. Minutes passed, each one stretching into eternity. The reentry was flawless. The heat shield held up under the extreme pressure, and the spacecraft made a controlled landing back on Earth. The room erupted in cheers. For the first time in SpaceX's history, they had successfully completed the entire mission, launch, re-entry, and landing with the new technology. It was a monumental achievement, one that brought them one step closer to the Mars mission. As the celebrations died down, Elon stood at the center of it all, his mind already racing ahead to the next challenge. But in that moment, he knew that they had done it. The unknown, once a terrifying void, had been conquered, and now the path to Mars was clear. But what lay beyond Mars? What other challenges and unknowns awaited humanity in the vast expanse of space? Elon knew this was only the beginning. The universe was calling, and SpaceX would answer. The success of the recent Starship test flight was a cause for celebration, but Elon knew that the work was far from over. In fact, the success brought with it a new set of challenges, bigger, more complex, and even more dangerous. SpaceX was now on the brink of sending humans to Mars, and the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. But as the team continued their preparations for the Mars mission, something unexpected happened. A new and unforeseen threat began to make itself known, one that threatened not only the mission's success, but also the very future of SpaceX itself. It started subtly, with whispers at first. A competitor in the aerospace industry, a company that had long been the established player, began to launch a series of moves that felt eerily calculated. They weren't just working on their own Mars mission. They were actively trying to sabotage SpaceX's efforts. Elon had long suspected that other companies might try to undermine SpaceX's success, but this felt different. This wasn't just corporate rivalry. It was personal. The stakes were growing larger, and those in positions of power were beginning to see SpaceX as a genuine threat. Not just in terms of technology, but in terms of ideology. It was Gwen who first alerted him to the situation, a sense of urgency in her voice as she called him into her office one afternoon. "Elon, we've got a problem," she said, closing the door behind him. "It's not just about the regulators or the technical hurdles anymore. There's a group within the government, and I'm talking about some very powerful people, who are actively trying to sabotage the Mars mission. And it's not just that. They've been working behind the scenes to spread misinformation about our technology, about our plans, and about you." Elon sat down, his mind racing. Who are these people? And why now? "They've been circling us for a while, trying to figure out how to stop us," Gwen replied. "But it's escalated. There's a sense of urgency on their part now. They don't just want to compete, they want to take us down." Elon's mind was in overdrive, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. The idea that his rivals might be going as far as trying to manipulate public perception, influence decision-makers, and sabotage SpaceX's reputation was a wake-up call. He had always known there would be resistance, but this was more than just corporate rivalry. It was a fight for the future, for the vision that he had put forward. "We can't let this stop us," Elon said, his voice steady. "If they think we'll back down because of a few whispers and rumors, they're wrong. We've faced worse. We'll keep pushing forward, no matter what." Gwen nodded, but the concern in her eyes was clear. "I agree, but we need to be careful. This is different. We're not just fighting for innovation. We're fighting for the future of humanity. And that makes us a target. We need to protect the integrity of SpaceX, and we need to protect the mission." Elon understood the weight of her words. He had always viewed the Mars mission as more than just a technological challenge. It was a philosophical one, a statement about the future of humanity. But as the opposition grew, so too did the pressure. As the weeks passed, the sabotage efforts intensified. It was no longer just misinformation. The competition began pulling strings in government circles, applying political pressure, trying to slow down SpaceX's progress at every turn. They were using every tool at their disposal, lobbyists, media campaigns, even legal tactics, to derail the Mars mission. But there was something else happening beneath the surface, something even more insidious. SpaceX's employees began to feel the strain. The constant barrage of negative press, the whispers of failure, the political pressure. It was taking a toll on morale. Some team members were beginning to question whether the mission was achievable, whether they could withstand the growing forces trying to bring them down. Elon noticed the change in the atmosphere. especially in the months leading up to the planned Mars mission launch. There was a shift in the energy at SpaceX. It was subtle at first, a hesitation in meetings, a quieter tone in the discussions, but it grew more pronounced. People weren't speaking up as much. There was fear in the air, and it wasn't just the fear of failure. The fear of being wrong, of taking on too much, was becoming contagious. It was then that Elon realized he needed to address the team directly to remind them of why they were doing this. He called for an all-hands meeting, a rare move for someone as private as him. The next morning, the entire SpaceX workforce gathered in a massive conference room. The mood was somber, and the uncertainty was palpable. Elon stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding silence as the crowd awaited his words. "We've been through a lot," he began, his voice calm but firm. "We've faced insurmountable odds before, and we've come through it all. We've been told we couldn't land a rocket. We've been told we couldn't send humans to Mars. We've been told that it was impossible." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. "But we're here today because we've always believed in something bigger. We're not just building rockets. We're building the future of humanity. And that future is worth every risk, every ounce of effort." The room was silent, everyone hanging on to his every word. "I won't pretend that what we're doing isn't hard. It is. It's the hardest thing we've ever done. But we're not in this alone. We're in this together. Every single one of you is a part of this mission, and every single one of you matters. No matter what happens, I want you to remember that. We're here to change the world, and we're going to do it." The energy in the room shifted. What had once been a sense of fear and doubt now began to transform into resolve. Elon knew that the battle they were facing wasn't just external. It was internal as well. They were fighting not just the competition or the politics, but their own doubts. And if they were going to succeed, they had to overcome those doubts together. As the meeting ended, the crowd slowly filed out of the room. The air felt different now, charged, ready. The threats they faced were real, and the challenges ahead would be immense. But Elon was no longer worried. He knew what they had to do. And now, more than ever, the mission was clear. The unknown threats could not stop them. The future of humanity was worth fighting for. With the team reinvigorated and the pressure mounting from all sides, Elon Musk's resolve was steeled. The external threats, be they from competitors, government entities, or misinformation campaigns, paled in comparison to the challenge of reaching Mars. But there was one more obstacle on the horizon, one that no one could have predicted, and it was coming from within. The week following his motivational speech to the team, Elon began to notice a shift in the work culture at SpaceX. There was a renewed sense of focus and unity, but there was also an undercurrent of unease. Some of his closest confidants began to question the timeline of the Mars mission. The complexity of the technology was escalating with every iteration, and the risks were becoming more apparent. People who had once worked tirelessly without pause now seemed to be second-guessing their own ideas. The exhaustion and pressure had begun to take its toll. The real moment of truth, however, came in the form of a phone call Elon hadn't expected, one that would change everything. It was an early morning, the kind of morning when the weight of everything he was responsible for seemed especially heavy. Elon was still in his office when his phone rang, interrupting his quiet thoughts. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end immediately gave him pause. "Elon," a calm but firm voice said. "This is Roger Davis from the Federal Aviation Administration. We need to talk about the upcoming Mars mission." A sinking feeling hit Elon's stomach. "What's the problem?" he asked, trying to mask the tension in his voice. "There's been some recent developments," Roger continued. "We've had a review of your current plans, and based on the data we've seen, we're going to have to halt your mission for now. There are concerns regarding the safety protocols and potential risks during re-entry. The Starship technology, as it stands, doesn't meet the necessary criteria for manned space travel to Mars." Elon's mind raced. He had anticipated resistance, but not like this. The idea that the mission could be delayed due to safety concerns was an enormous blow, especially after all they had accomplished. But this wasn't just about rockets. This was about something bigger. The dream of reaching Mars was at risk of being crushed by a bureaucratic oversight. "How long are we talking?" Elon asked, keeping his voice steady, though his mind was spiraling. "We're going to need at least 6 months to reevaluate the mission," Roger replied. "There are also concerns about the environmental impacts of your technology. We need more data on that as well. The clock is ticking, Elon. We have to get this right, or the entire mission could be delayed indefinitely." The words hung in the air like a thick fog, clouding Elon's thoughts. The delay would mean months of additional work, a prolonged period of uncertainty. It wasn't just SpaceX that would suffer, it was the future of space exploration itself. "Roger," Elon said after a long pause, "this is bigger than any one company. We can fix these issues. We've overcome every obstacle in our path before. We can do it again. I'll get the team together, and we'll find a solution. We won't stop." Roger's voice softened, but there was still a hint of doubt. "I hope you can. But you have to understand, Elon, we're not just talking about a company here. We're talking about the future of space exploration. It has to be done right. We can't afford to take shortcuts." The call ended, and Elon was left staring at the phone in disbelief. He had expected delays, but the weight of this call, the consequences of not meeting the safety standards, were more than just a setback. They were a potential disaster for the mission. In the hours that followed, Elon couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. If the regulators didn't approve the Mars mission, all of SpaceX's hard work, all the sacrifices the team had made, would be for nothing. The road ahead was suddenly littered with new, treacherous obstacles. The following day, Elon convened a meeting with his top engineers, Gwynn, and a few of the key members of the leadership team. The mood was serious, the room tense with anticipation. It was time to face the truth. There were critical issues that needed to be addressed, and there was no room for error. "We've got a problem," Elon began, his voice calm but direct. "The FAA has put a hold on the Mars mission. We need to fix the issues with the safety protocols and environmental concerns. But we're running out of time. If we don't address this in the next few weeks, the mission could be delayed indefinitely." Gwynn looked up from the table, her expression serious but determined. "We knew something like this was possible, but it's more than just a setback. This could jeopardize everything." Elon nodded. "Exactly. But we've faced worse. We need to focus on what we can control. I want every engineer to go back to the drawing board. We need better data, better simulations, and we need to prove that our technology is safe for the crew and the environment. We can do this. I know we can." The engineers and team members began to discuss possible solutions, throwing out ideas, some far-fetched, others grounded in reality. Elon felt the familiar spark of creativity ignite within him. This was the moment they had been waiting for. It was time to innovate once again, to find a way through the storm. But as the meeting continued, a growing sense of urgency hung in the air. The competition was not slowing down. The external pressures were mounting. And now, with the delay looming, Elon had to make a choice. Did they play by the rules and risk everything? Or did they push forward, knowing that the future of humanity was at stake? Later that night, as Elon sat in his office alone, staring out the window at the sprawling SpaceX campus, he thought about the bigger picture. The Mars mission was no longer just a goal. It was a symbol of something larger. It was about the future of space exploration. It was about what humanity could achieve when it dared to dream big. He knew the risks. He knew the stakes. But one thing was certain. The journey to Mars was inevitable. And if the regulators and competitors stood in the way, then SpaceX would find a way to break through those barriers. There was no turning back now. The unknown was calling. And Elon Musk was determined to answer. The pressure continued to mount as SpaceX grappled with the unexpected obstacles. Elon knew that the regulatory hurdles were just one aspect of the larger challenge. There were larger forces at play, forces that could determine the fate of humanity's future beyond Earth. With the Mars mission on the line, the battle had shifted from technological innovation to something far more complex: bureaucracy, politics, and public opinion. SpaceX had always prided itself on its ability to innovate and move quickly. It was the company's defining strength, being able to tackle seemingly impossible problems and finding creative solutions that others hadn't even considered. But this time, the situation felt different. The stakes had become personal for some, and the internal divisions were starting to show. Elon had made his decision. He was going to push forward with the mission, no matter the cost. But to do so, He had to make a calculated gamble, one that would change the course of history, but also bring about unimaginable risk. The first step was meeting with Gwyn and his senior engineers to assess the situation. They needed to evaluate what was at stake, not just from a technical standpoint, but politically as well. In these types of circumstances, it wasn't enough to just have the best technology. They needed to find a way to navigate the complexities of government, regulations, and corporate rivals. Gwyn sat across from Elon in the conference room, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. Elon, we both know the regulatory bodies aren't just going to roll over. If we push forward without addressing their concerns, we could be facing serious legal action. I'm talking about lawsuits, fines, and the possibility of having our licenses revoked. Elon leaned forward, his mind already calculating the possibilities. What if we take a more direct approach? What if we go public with the data we have? Release all the information on the safety measures and the environmental protocols we've developed. Let the public make their own judgment. We've always believed in transparency. Gwyn furrowed her brow. You're talking about taking this into the public sphere? Are you prepared for the backlash? The media will tear us apart if we do that. And what if the data doesn't convince them? Then we double down, Elon said. We show them that we're not afraid to take risks. That's been our mantra since the beginning. We've always faced adversity with boldness. Now is the time to be even bolder. We have nothing to hide, Gwyn. We're not just a company. We're the future. And the future won't wait for anyone. Gwyn took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Elon's. I've always trusted your vision, Elon, but this feels like we're playing with fire. The media, the government, the competition, they're all watching us. If we make the wrong move, it could cost us everything. Elon didn't flinch. If we don't make this move, we lose everything anyway. The mission, humanity's future, it's all at risk. We can't afford to play it safe. We've got to change the narrative. It's our only shot. After a long pause, Gwyn nodded. All right, we'll do it your way. But we need to be ready for everything that's coming. That evening, Elon and his team prepared a comprehensive report detailing the latest developments in their mission, focusing specifically on the safety protocols, environmental studies, and the incredible advancements SpaceX had made. They were meticulous, ensuring that every piece of data was clear, accessible, and transparent. They wanted to be as thorough as possible, knowing that this was their chance to shift the narrative. The next morning, Elon called a press conference. The world would be watching, and this time, SpaceX wasn't going to hold back. The goal wasn't just to respond to critics, it was to take control of the narrative. It was to show that the future of space travel wasn't just about competing. It was about taking bold steps toward an uncertain but transformative future. The conference room was filled with reporters, cameras, and media personnel from every corner of the globe. The stakes were high. Elon could feel the weight of the moment as he stood at the podium, ready to face the crowd. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady. I stand before you today not just as the CEO of SpaceX, but as someone who believes in the future of humanity. We are on the verge of something monumental, an endeavor that could change the course of history. The Mars mission is not just a project for SpaceX. It is a mission for all of humanity. He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle in. We've heard the criticisms. We've heard the doubts. And I'm here to tell you that we've listened. We've made adjustments. We've worked tirelessly to ensure that our technology meets the highest standards of safety and environmental responsibility. And we are confident in the path we've chosen. The reporters were scribbling notes, but Elon could feel their skepticism. He had anticipated it. Now it was time for the revelation. We are not just launching rockets. We are building a future. A future where humanity becomes a multi-planetary species. We believe that the future of space exploration and of life itself is on Mars. And we are not afraid to take the steps necessary to get there, no matter how difficult the journey may be. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of several key reporters. But what I want you to understand is this: SpaceX will not be deterred. We will continue to innovate, to push boundaries, and to lead. We will take the risks necessary to ensure that humanity survives and thrives beyond Earth. This mission is bigger than any one company. It's about the survival of our species. There was a moment of silence in the room. Elon knew they were processing what he had just said. Some might see it as arrogance, others as the audacity of a visionary. But in that room, he knew the stakes were clear. This wasn't just about rockets. This was about legacy. The questions came fast and hard. Mr. Musk, do you think the public will trust SpaceX with such an ambitious mission, given the challenges and risks involved? Elon, how do you respond to critics who say the technology isn't ready for Mars? The environmental concerns about the Starship's carbon footprint, what do you say to those? Elon answered each question with the same confidence he had displayed in the meeting with Gwynn. He didn't have all the answers, but he had the vision, and that was enough to move forward. After the press conference ended, the media buzzed with reports, some favorable, some skeptical. But one thing was clear. Elon had put the ball back in the court of the public. The narrative had shifted. SpaceX was no longer on the defensive. They were leading the charge into the unknown, and the world was watching. But as the media coverage spread, a new challenge emerged. A shadowy figure from the past who seemed intent on making Elon's mission more difficult than ever before. And this time, it wasn't just about corporate competition. This person had a more personal stake in the mission's failure. Elon didn't know it yet, but the real battle was just beginning. The enemy wasn't just the critics or the regulators. It was someone who knew him, and SpaceX, better than anyone. And this adversary would stop at nothing to ensure that SpaceX's mission to Mars would never leave the ground. The press conference had been a gamble, a dangerous one, but Elon Musk had made his move. He had put SpaceX in the spotlight, and whether the world agreed with him or not, there was no turning back now. The next steps, though, would require not just the strength of his team, but also the power to outmaneuver those who would want to see him, and the Mars mission, fail. But as the media storm raged on, there was a much quieter and far more insidious threat looming in the background. Someone from Elon's past had resurfaced, someone whose motivations were unclear but whose intentions were deeply personal. It started with a cryptic message, one that Elon received late one night while he was in his office, going over reports and scheming out the next steps in SpaceX's strategy. The message came from an unknown number, and the words were simple but chilling. "Do you remember me, Elon? I haven't forgotten. You've made some dangerous enemies." Elon's fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. His mind immediately started to piece together possibilities. Who could it be? A rival in the aerospace industry? An old business associate? Or someone with a more personal vendetta? Elon had made his fair share of enemies over the years, but this felt different. The wording, the cryptic nature, it seemed like something more than just a vague threat. He shook his head, dismissing the thought for the moment. There were too many things at play, too many deadlines to meet. And yet, he couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something darker was brewing. The next morning, Elon shared the message with Gwynn. She was one of the few people he trusted implicitly, and if there was anyone who could help him make sense of this, it was her. Gwynn was reading the message on her tablet, her brow furrowed. "This doesn't feel like an anonymous troll, Elon. This sounds like someone who knows you, someone who has a real reason to target you." Elon leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. "I can't afford distractions, Gwynn. Not now. The Mars mission is too important." "I know," she said, not looking up from the tablet. "But we can't ignore this. Whoever it is has a stake in taking you down. And that means we need to figure out who they are before they figure out how to derail you." Elon had dealt with his fair share of opposition, from early investors to critics of his more outlandish goals. But this felt different. This felt personal. It was a reminder that the higher you climbed, the more enemies you made. And some of those enemies weren't content with just competing for market share or recognition. Some of them would go to any lengths to destroy you. Over the next few weeks, Elon's team worked tirelessly on the Mars mission, but the atmosphere at SpaceX had shifted. The initial wave of optimism had started to ebb, replaced by an undercurrent of paranoia. Every meeting, every decision felt clouded by the possibility that someone was watching them, waiting for them to slip. Then, late one afternoon, the shadowy figure behind the cryptic message made their first physical move. Elon was heading home when he received a call from a trusted member of his security team. There had been a break-in at one of SpaceX's development facilities, a location that housed some of their most sensitive research and prototype data for the Mars mission. The thief, or thieves, had been clever. Nothing was immediately missing. But the team found something odd. A strange device planted inside one of the Starship prototypes. It wasn't a standard piece of equipment, and it didn't belong. Elon felt his blood run cold. The device wasn't just a surveillance tool. It was a subtle but deliberate act of sabotage. Whoever had placed it there had been inside the facility long enough to tamper with their equipment, but had left no trace of their presence. This wasn't just an anonymous threat. It was someone with intimate knowledge of SpaceX's operations. Someone who knew exactly how to plant a device without raising suspicion. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a prelude to something much more sinister. That night, Elon couldn't sleep. The device had been found and neutralized, but the fact that it had been so carefully planted left him rattled. If someone was willing to go to such lengths to undermine SpaceX's work, then they were playing a dangerous game. He thought back to the cryptic message, "Do you remember me, Elon?" The words haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Gwyn, sensing his unease, reached out to him early the next morning. "Elon, I think we need to revisit the people from your past. There's a chance this person is someone who knows the company intimately." Elon sighed. "I've been thinking the same thing. The question is, who?" The two of them spent hours going over potential suspects, old colleagues, disgruntled former employees, even rivals in the aerospace sector. But no matter who they considered, one name kept coming back to mind. A name Elon hadn't thought about in years. Evan Ford. Evan had been a former business partner, someone who had once been deeply involved in the early days of SpaceX. But when it became clear that Elon's vision for the company was far more ambitious than Evan had anticipated, they had parted ways, abruptly. Elon had never fully understood the rift, but he suspected that Evan had never truly forgiven him for their falling out. Evan had always been a man driven by pride and ambition, but unlike Elon, he lacked the ability to take risks. When he had left, Elon had always wondered if he would come back to haunt him. "Do you think it's him?" Gwyn asked, her voice low. "I don't know," Elon admitted, "but I wouldn't put it past him. He's always had a chip on his shoulder, and he knows enough about SpaceX's inner workings to make things difficult." That evening, Elon decided to take a more proactive approach. He called in his private investigators, instructing them to track down Evan Ford and anyone else who might have a personal vendetta against him. He couldn't afford to let this go on any longer. The sabotage was only a warning shot, and he knew that the real attack was yet to come. As the investigation unfolded, Elon remained on high alert. He couldn't afford to be distracted. The Mars mission still had to go forward, and nothing, not even this shadowy figure from his past, was going to stop him. But little did Elon know, Evan Ford was closer than he thought, and the stakes had just gotten a lot higher. Elon Musk was no stranger to pressure. In fact, he thrived in it. But this was different. This wasn't just the usual corporate challenge, or the race to get to Mars, or the fight to bring electric cars to the masses. This was personal. Whoever had targeted him knew exactly where to strike, and each calculated move made Elon realize that he wasn't just up against a rival businessman or competitor. He was up against a shadow from his past that seemed hell-bent on undermining everything SpaceX had worked for. Elon's thoughts raced as he sat in his office late one night, reviewing the report from the private investigators. They'd uncovered something unsettling. Evan Ford, the man Elon had once trusted, had resurfaced in a way that was far too coincidental. Not only had Evan been in the aerospace industry, but he had also been secretly building his own private venture, one focused on space exploration, though far more conservative in its approach than Elon's bold vision for the future. And the most disturbing piece of information? Evan's company had been struggling to secure funding, in large part due to SpaceX's overwhelming success. There had been reports of a frustrated Evan, angry over his inability to keep up with the pace set by SpaceX. The investigators had uncovered records suggesting that Evan had been reaching out to former colleagues, possibly even allies within regulatory bodies, attempting to halt SpaceX's operations. Elon's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Gwyn. "We need to talk. Something's going on. Meet me in the war room in 15 minutes. Elon's stomach tightened. Whatever this was, he knew it wasn't going to be good. When Elon arrived at the war room, Gwyn was already there, along with a handful of key members from the leadership team. The mood was tense. Elon, we've got a serious problem, Gwen began, her voice uncharacteristically grim. We've traced Evan's movements, and he's been in contact with some high-level players, people in positions to influence policy, people who can help him bring down SpaceX. I'm talking about regulators, even certain politicians who are known to be skeptical of private space ventures. Elon's heart rate quickened. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't anticipated an all-out political war. So, what's the game plan? He asked, trying to mask the tension in his voice. We can't just sit back and wait for him to strike again. We need to go on the offensive, Gwen replied. We have to start a media campaign to ensure the public knows who's behind this. We need to make it clear that SpaceX is not some fly-by-night company. It's the future of humanity, and we're not backing down. Elon nodded. He had always known that SpaceX's mission wasn't just about building rockets. It was about changing the world, and in doing so, it was inevitable that they would face opposition. But what bothered him more than anything was the thought of betrayal. Evan had been someone he had once trusted, and now he was using that knowledge against him. We've got to handle this carefully, Elon said, rubbing his temples. I don't want this to turn into some kind of smear campaign. If we fight fire with fire, we're no better than they are. I agree, Gwen said. We'll keep things professional. The last thing we want is for this to turn into a mud fight. But we need to expose his intentions before he gets the chance to make his next move. Over the next few days, SpaceX's communications team worked tirelessly to craft a response that would highlight the company's transparency and commitment to the public good. They planned a series of interviews where Elon would speak directly to the media, addressing both the Mars mission and the allegations of sabotage. The goal was to show the world that SpaceX was not just a tech company. It was an agent of change, pushing humanity toward a future beyond Earth. The media tour began with a high-profile interview on a popular news network. Elon was prepared, calm, and confident. He knew this was his chance to take control of the narrative. The interviewer, an experienced journalist known for his tough questions, wasted no time getting into the heart of the matter. Elon, there's been a lot of speculation about SpaceX's Mars mission, especially in light of recent events. Critics have pointed to the environmental concerns surrounding your technology, and now there's a suggestion that someone within your company, or perhaps even a former partner, is trying to sabotage your work. How do you respond to these claims? Elon didn't flinch. First of all, let me make one thing clear, he said, his voice steady. SpaceX has always been transparent about our goals and our technology. We've always taken the necessary precautions to ensure that what we do is safe for the environment. We've worked hard to develop the most advanced technology in the world to get humanity to Mars, and nothing, not even baseless accusations, will derail our mission. The interviewer pressed on. But what about these allegations of sabotage? Some people believe that there's a concerted effort to discredit your company. Is there any truth to this? Elon leaned forward, his expression intense. Yes, there's truth to it, but I can't say much more at the moment. What I will say is that we're taking this seriously. We've discovered that there are individuals, people with personal grudges against me and SpaceX, who are trying to undermine our efforts. We won't be intimidated, and we won't be silenced. The journalist seemed taken aback by Elon's directness, but pressed further. And who exactly are these individuals? Is there someone in particular you're pointing to? Elon hesitated for just a moment. He knew this was the critical moment. Naming names could backfire, but he couldn't hold back. I'm not going to name anyone just yet, but I will say this. SpaceX has faced opposition from the beginning, and we've overcome every challenge that's come our way. We will continue to do so. Whoever is behind these actions will be exposed, and we will not let them stop us. The interview went viral, sparking debates across social media, news outlets, and political circles. Some rallied behind Elon, supporting his vision and his determination to push forward with the Mars mission. Others, however, were more skeptical, and some pointed to the recent sabotage attempt as evidence that SpaceX might not be ready for such a monumental task. Behind the scenes, SpaceX's legal and security teams were working around the clock to track down Evan and anyone else involved in the conspiracy. But as Elon and Gwen had feared, the web of influence surrounding them was far more extensive than they had imagined. There were whispers of powerful backers, hidden agendas, and long-standing rivalries that were all converging on SpaceX. Elon had known that nothing worth doing was easy, but this was shaping up to be his greatest challenge yet. As the investigation deepened, Elon's resolve only strengthened. He had come this far. He wasn't about to let anyone take it all away from him. The Mars mission was more than just rockets and technology. It was about the future of humanity, and he would stop at nothing to see it succeed. But little did Elon know, his battle with Evan Ford was only one piece of the puzzle. As the web tightened around him, the true mastermind behind the campaign to bring down SpaceX was about to reveal themselves, and they were far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. Elon Musk sat on the balcony of his private residence, gazing out at the California skyline. The evening sun cast long shadows over the city, painting the landscape with hues of orange and red. But no matter how beautiful the view was, Elon couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this felt like something more. It felt like he was being pulled into a shadowy game he hadn't signed up for. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. SpaceX's public relations efforts were in full swing, and the media storm surrounding the Mars mission and the allegations of sabotage had reached a boiling point. But behind the scenes, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was escalating. Gwen's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone measured but urgent. "Elon, we've got a new lead." He straightened in his chair. "What's happened?" "We've dug deeper into Evan Ford's connections," Gwen explained. "It turns out, he's not working alone. There's someone else, someone we didn't anticipate. A major player from the aerospace industry, someone with deep pockets and a vested interest in keeping SpaceX from succeeding." Elon felt a knot form in his stomach. He had suspected that there was more to this than just Evan. It was always the case, wasn't it? When the stakes were this high, there were always bigger forces lurking in the background. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice tight. "Jonathan Pierce," Gwen replied, her voice laced with tension. "He's the CEO of Astrotech, a rival company that's been trailing SpaceX for years. We've always known they were competing with us, but it looks like their efforts have taken a much darker turn. Pierce has been funding Evan and even has a hand in the political connections we've been tracking." Elon leaned forward, his mind racing. Astrotech was one of the few companies with the resources to take on SpaceX head-to-head, but it had always been on the back burner, just one of many players in the industry. To think that they had been behind the sabotage and orchestrating this campaign against him was a game-changer. It meant that the battle was much bigger than a few disgruntled ex-partners. "Pierce," Elon muttered. He remembered the man vaguely, stubborn, wealthy, and with a reputation for playing by his own rules. Astrotech had never been able to match SpaceX's vision or pace, but it had always been a formidable competitor, especially when it came to government contracts and satellite launches. Pierce had always been just a step behind him, but clearly, he hadn't been willing to stay in second place. "We need to take action," Gwen said, her eyes locking with Elon's. "We can't let them pull the strings behind the scenes. If Pierce and Ford are working together, they won't stop until they've completely destroyed everything we've built." Elon nodded, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had fought battles before, but this one felt different. There were forces at play, political, financial, and personal, that he hadn't anticipated. His mission to take humanity to Mars was no longer just about technology and innovation. It was about survival. If he didn't act quickly, everything could come crashing down. In the days that followed, SpaceX's security team intensified their efforts to track down the full extent of Astrotech's involvement. They found evidence of secret meetings between Jonathan Pierce and high-ranking politicians, with whispers of large sums of money changing hands. Pierce's motives were becoming clearer by the day. He wanted control of the space industry, and he would do anything to get it, even if it meant playing dirty. But even more troubling was the realization that Pierce's influence extended beyond the aerospace industry. He had allies in the military-industrial complex, and his connections in the political world were far-reaching. The sabotage at SpaceX wasn't just a petty act of revenge. It was part of a larger, well-coordinated campaign to crush Musk's ambitions and maintain control over the future of space. Elon's first instinct was to fight back, to go public, to expose Pierce and Ford for what they were. But Gwen had cautioned against this. Exposing them could backfire, she warned. Pierce is a master manipulator. If we go on the offensive too early, we risk making him a martyr. We need to play this strategically. So instead, Elon turned his attention to an unexpected source of power: the public. SpaceX had always prided itself on transparency, and now, more than ever, that transparency was their greatest weapon. Elon began to make his presence felt in the media in a way he hadn't before. He shared more about the mission to Mars, but he also spoke about the risks involved, not just the risks of space travel, but the risks of going up against the entrenched powers that had dominated the industry for decades. He wasn't just a tech mogul anymore. He was a symbol of defiance against a system that valued control over progress. As the weeks passed, the pressure mounted. SpaceX was forced to navigate political landmines, media backlash, and constant threats of sabotage. But through it all, Elon remained resolute. His resolve to take humanity to Mars had never wavered. Even in the face of personal betrayal and corporate sabotage, he had built SpaceX to challenge the status quo, and he would not let anyone, no matter how powerful, stand in his way. But as the tension grew, so did the uncertainty. Every move he made seemed to be watched, and every action seemed to be met with a counterattack. There was no telling who was pulling the strings, or what their ultimate goal was. Was it just business? Or was there something deeper at play, something more insidious? One night, as Elon was preparing to board a flight for a critical meeting with a group of investors, Gwyn called him. Her voice was unusually calm, but there was an edge to it that immediately put Elon on alert. "Elon," she began, "I think we've just uncovered something big." "Go on," Elon replied, his pulse quickening. "We've been tracking Pierce's movements, and we've finally pieced together something important. He's been working with a shadow group, a clandestine organization that has ties to both corporate and government sectors. They've been orchestrating this whole campaign against you." Elon's heart skipped a beat. What kind of group? And what do they want? "We don't know yet," Gwyn said. "But what we do know is that they've been manipulating people in high places, some of the very people who control the funding for space missions. And they've been working for months to undermine the entire private space industry." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the bigger picture was still a blur. Who were these people? And why had they chosen to target SpaceX? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just a battle for Mars. It was a fight for the future of space exploration itself. Elon Musk had always been a fighter, but as the days stretched on, the weight of the battle he was engaged in seemed heavier than ever. It was no longer just about the dream of sending humans to Mars. Now, it was about protecting the very foundation of SpaceX and ensuring that nothing would derail his vision of a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth. He sat in his office late one evening, staring at the large, intricate map of SpaceX's current projects displayed on his screen. There were launches scheduled, new technologies in development, and thousands of employees working tirelessly toward the shared goal of expanding humanity's reach. But it all seemed so fragile now. Pierce's grip on the political and economic machinery surrounding the space industry had grown tighter, and the sabotage efforts had only intensified. The threats against SpaceX were becoming increasingly coordinated and professional, and Elon had learned to expect the unexpected. Every step he took, every decision he made, felt like he was walking a tightrope with no safety net below. Gwyn entered the room, her face as determined as ever, though a tiredness lingered in her eyes. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but urgent. He nodded and gestured for her to sit. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said earlier, about Pierce's network and the shadow group. We need to end this, once and for all." Gwyn took a seat across from him, folding her hands. "I agree. We've been playing defense for far too long. It's time to take the fight to them." Elon leaned forward, his mind already racing with plans. "But we need to be careful. We can't afford to make any mistakes. If we go public with too much information, we risk giving them the ammunition they need to discredit us. We need to be strategic." "We've got something," Gwyn said, her voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "We've intercepted communications that confirm Pierce is meeting with members of Congress next week. There's a vote coming up, a key decision on private space exploration funding. If we don't act, It could change the entire landscape for us. Elon's eyes narrowed. He had been prepared for corporate sabotage, but now it was clear. This wasn't just about business. This was about shaping the future of space exploration, and if Pierce and his shadow group succeeded, it could set back SpaceX by decades. How much time do we have? Elon asked. Not much. We've got to move fast, Gwen said. But there's something else. We've been tracking Evan Ford's movements, and we believe he's about to make a major move against us. If we don't act now, we risk losing everything. Elon didn't need to hear more. His mind was already made up. This wasn't just about the money or the rockets or even Mars anymore. This was about the people who had supported SpaceX from the very beginning, the engineers, the employees, the investors who had believed in the mission. He couldn't let them down. We need to take control of the narrative, Elon said, his voice firm. I'll go public. We'll expose Pierce and Ford for what they're doing. It's time the world knew the truth. And we'll make sure the people who stand in our way know that we're not backing down. The next few days were a blur of strategy meetings, late-night phone calls, and rehearsals for Elon's upcoming media appearance. This time, he would not just be defending SpaceX from a corporate attack. He was going to expose the corruption at the heart of the aerospace industry, people who were more interested in profit than the future of humanity. This was going to be his most public stand yet. As the day of the interview approached, the team worked to fine-tune every detail. This wasn't just about Elon's words. It was about his image, his persona. The goal was clear. Make the public see what was really at stake. He would have to draw a line in the sand, one that separated those who wanted to keep space exploration as a private club for the rich and powerful, and those who believed it was humanity's right to reach for the stars. On the day of the interview, the atmosphere was electric. A live broadcast was set up in one of SpaceX's most iconic facilities. Elon walked in, calm but ready. His heart beat a little faster as he glanced around, the weight of the moment pressing on him. He knew the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. This wasn't just about launching rockets. It was about setting a precedent for the future of space exploration itself. When the interviewer, a respected journalist, introduced Elon to the audience, the room fell silent. The tension was palpable. This wasn't just another CEO talking about the next big innovation. This was Elon Musk preparing to take on the most powerful forces in the world. Elon, the interviewer began, thank you for joining us today. There's been a lot of noise around SpaceX recently, especially with the growing concerns about your Mars mission and the ongoing challenges the company is facing. What can you tell us about the situation? Elon took a deep breath. First, let me say this. SpaceX has always been about one thing, putting humanity on a path to becoming a multiplanetary species. This is about the survival of humanity. And it's about the future of space exploration, a future that should be available to all, not just a select few. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But recently, we've faced attacks not just on our company, but on the very principles we stand for. There are powerful individuals, some within the aerospace industry, who don't want private space exploration to succeed. They're more comfortable with the old ways of doing things, where the rich and the powerful control the direction of space travel. They've used political influence, financial power, and even sabotage to try and stop us. The interviewer's eyes widened as Elon's words hit the airwaves. Are you saying this is an orchestrated campaign? Elon nodded. Yes, and it's being led by Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Astrotech, along with a man I once trusted, Evan Ford. They've been working behind the scenes, trying to manipulate key policymakers and regulators, all to protect their own interests and stop SpaceX from succeeding. The camera zoomed in on Elon, his face resolute. We will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. This is bigger than SpaceX. This is about making sure that the future of space exploration is open to everyone, not just a select group of elites. The people of the world deserve to have a say in how we reach the stars. As the interview ended, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted with hashtags like #SpaceXTruth and #MarsForEveryone. News outlets picked up the story, and within hours, the story of the corporate sabotage and political maneuvering had spread across the globe. Elon's words had resonated deeply with the public, and the pressure on Pierce and Ford intensified. But there was no time to rest. Elon knew this battle was far from over. In the coming days, There would be counterattacks, legal battles, and even more sabotage attempts. But Elon was ready. He had no choice but to fight, not just for SpaceX, but for the future of space exploration itself. The final push had begun, and Elon Musk wasn't about to lose. The weight of the battle had grown so heavy that it seemed almost impossible to carry alone. Elon Musk had built SpaceX from the ground up, enduring the challenges, the failures, the doubts, and the relentless drive for a future beyond Earth. But the stakes had never been higher. Now, with the fight against Jonathan Pierce and the Shadow Group threatening everything he had worked for, Elon knew that there could be no turning back. The media blitz that had followed Elon's explosive interview had ignited a firestorm. SpaceX's name was being debated at every dinner table, on every social media feed, and in every corner of the world. The public was on edge, torn between those who saw Elon as a visionary and those who saw him as a threat. But one thing was certain: the world was watching, and Pierce knew it. For weeks, Pierce had been preparing for the inevitable backlash. He had attempted to bury the story with smear campaigns, spinning narratives about Elon's supposed disregard for safety and his obsession with reaching Mars at all costs. His allies in politics and the media tried to label him as a reckless billionaire, someone who could not be trusted with the future of humanity. But it wasn't enough. The people were starting to see through the lies. Gwen sat in Elon's office, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. "We've uncovered more of Pierce's financial ties. He's been trying to move large sums of money through offshore accounts, and we've found evidence that he's been trying to bribe key officials to influence the upcoming vote on space funding. It's a desperate move. He knows that if we win this vote, his hold on the space industry will be over." Elon nodded, his mind moving rapidly. "What's the timeline?" "The vote is in 2 days," Gwen replied. "If we're going to stop him, we need to make sure the right people understand just how deep his corruption runs. We've got enough proof to make this public, but we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we could lose everything." Elon rubbed his temples, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "We can't let him win. Not now. Not after everything we've sacrificed. SpaceX is bigger than just one man. But the fight we're in right now, it's a fight for the future." "Exactly," Gwen said. "But we can't take the fight to Pierce alone. We need to rally the public, get the support of key figures in the space industry. If the people back us, we'll have the power to turn this around." As the days ticked down, Elon and his team worked tirelessly, securing alliances with influential figures in the tech world, government, and space exploration. One by one, they managed to rally people to their cause: scientists, engineers, investors, and even former rivals who saw the importance of SpaceX's mission. The movement to expose Pierce's corruption was growing stronger, but it would only be successful if they acted quickly and decisively. On the day before the vote, Elon stood before a live camera once more, his face resolute. "I'm here today not just to talk about rockets and Mars," he began, his voice calm but powerful. "I'm here to talk about something much bigger: the future of space exploration, the future of humanity. What we're building at SpaceX isn't just about sending a few people to another planet. It's about creating a future where every person on Earth can look up at the stars and know that they too have a chance to reach them. That dream is under threat by a group of individuals who would rather maintain their monopoly on space than let humanity's future unfold." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "Jonathan Pierce has been using his wealth, his power, and his political connections to undermine what we've worked for. He's been manipulating the system, using illegal means to sabotage SpaceX, and now he's trying to control the future of space exploration through bribery and coercion. This is not just about competition. This is about the integrity of the entire industry." Elon's words were measured, but the intensity in his voice was unmistakable. "We will not let this continue. We are committed to the dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species, and we will fight for that dream with everything we have. I ask you, the public, the people who have believed in this mission from the beginning, to stand with us. Together, we can make sure that this future is for everyone, not just for a few powerful elites." The impact of Elon's statement was immediate. Across social media, the hashtags #ExposePierce and #FutureForAll began trending. News outlets began to pick up the story, and within hours, the pressure on Pierce and his allies reached a breaking point. As the day of the vote approached, Pierce became increasingly desperate. He made a final, desperate attempt to influence the outcome by threatening lawmakers, offering them lucrative contracts, and pressuring them to vote in his favor. But the tide had already turned. The public was now fully aware of his corruption, and his influence began to wane. The day of the vote arrived. Elon paced back and forth in his office, the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was the moment that would define everything. If they won, it would be a victory not just for SpaceX, but for the future of space exploration. If they lost, it would be a crushing blow. Finally, the results came in. The vote had been overwhelmingly in SpaceX's favor. The government had approved the funding for private space exploration, securing the future of SpaceX's mission to Mars. It was a moment of triumph, but it wasn't over yet. The battle with Pierce and his shadow group was far from finished. But this was a decisive victory, one that ensured that the dream of a future beyond Earth would continue to thrive. Elon stood in front of the cameras one last time, this time with a smile on his face. Today, we've taken a huge step toward the future. The people have spoken, and they've chosen progress over corruption. This is just the beginning. We will continue to work tirelessly, and together, we will make sure that humanity reaches for the stars. This is our future, and we will not stop until we get there. The crowd erupted into applause, but Elon's mind was already moving forward. There were new challenges ahead, new hurdles to overcome. But one thing was certain: SpaceX had just secured its place in history, and Elon Musk, against all odds, had emerged victorious. As the final moments of the battle against Pierce came to a close, Elon knew that the fight for space exploration was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But for now, the future was bright. Humanity was one step closer to reaching the stars, and Elon Musk had made sure that no one would stand in the way. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?